And Purnaprajna Prabhu should be coming any second. So I think you have to mute yourself for this because if you want to sing along, it has to be muted. Otherwise, it comes out all disjointed. Namah Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Iti Namine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvashesha Shunyavani Paschachadishatarine Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvashesha Shunyavadi Paschacha Deshatarine Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Jaya Sri
Krishna Chaitanya
Prabhu
Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Sivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda.
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama Rama Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare
Jai Purnaprajna Prabhu, thank you very much for coming back to read your book with us.
Happy to be here.
Because if Rasangi Devi Dasi comes, she's always full of questions, so you're the best one to answer. All right.
Haribol, Gaura, we're going to have you on our phone while we're downstairs having prasadam. And
Okay.
as soon as we're done and can partake, we'll raise our hand as soon as we can
Okay,
participate.
perfect. Thank you for letting me know about
Okay.
Appreciate that.
Thank you. We're
Jai.
so excited. Thank you
Yes.
to be here. Okay, Haribol.
Wow. Not only do we have Stoka Krishna Prabhu here from Melbourne, Australia, but Rupanuga Prabhu actually is joining us as well. Thank you, Rupanuga Prabhu. Obeisances to you and everyone else. Hare Krishna.
Haribol.
Jai. Happy to see you. Krishna fulfills all desires. From what I understand, Purnaprajna Prabhu, Rupanuga Prabhu was, and besides, of course, Srila Prabhupada, Rupanuga Prabhu was an inspiration to you to write this book. Is that correct?
Very much so. I always had an interest, but I thought I was very isolated in it. But while talking to Rupanuga, not just complaining about the past, but looking forward, what can be done in the future. We both agreed the BI never challenged the Darwin's theory. We can do it.
Now, I remember a book back in, I don't know, early 80s, Gyanadas Prabhu wrote, I think Darwin's Secret Identity. Was that not a challenge to Darwin?
Yes, I have that book. Someone gave it to me. And while I was writing my book, towards the end, I got the book. So I used some ideas from that and incorporated it in my book. I thought it was very nicely thought out book. A little bit too many cartoon-like pictures, perhaps, but he had a lot of really solid ideas, and it was also an inspiration. And I picked up some things from him for sure. The interesting thing is that after I finished my book, I contacted him. First of all, I found out the book is written by David Webb. I found out that David Webb is Gyana Das, and
Okay.
Gyana Das became Nemi Maharaj, Bhaktivedanta Nemi Maharaj. So I got his email address and I corresponded with him. And I asked him, could I send you soft copy of my book? He said, sure. I sent it and he read it and he said, oh, it's very good. I think it's very nice. I hope you have all success. And then he sent me many of his own work, videos and a course plan that he had made. So I shared that with Rupanuga also. And we saw that he had changed course from that Darwin's Secret Identity book. He was more into attracting people interested in consciousness studies and like that.
I see. Okay. Interesting. I wrote to him the other day and he told me that you had sent a copy of your book to him and that he appreciates it a lot.
I sent it to former Madhava also.
Oh,
I don't know what his sannyas name is now, I forget.
Madhavapuri Maharaj.
Yeah. So I sent him also. We were good friends at the BI in Juhu, 79, 80, 81, until he left. And he also thought the book was very nice, but that's all.
Oh, great. It would be great if we could get you, him, Madhava Maharaj, and Nimi Maharaj is the name of Gyanadas's sannyas name, and have a Bhaktivedanta Institute discussion. I love that. I don't know about the rest of you. Okay, I've just
That would be great. That would be great.
lined the page here.
Are we reading? What's that?
Yeah. Okay, so the order I have is myself, then Krishna Chandra, then Purnaprajna, Rupanuga, then it looks like Bhavatarini. We have quite a few readers here tonight. So, out of respect to you, Rupanuga Prabhu, would you like us to start with you first, or should I just read in the order that people appear on my screen?
Whatever you like. What page are we on? Can you tell me that? I have the book I can read. Oh, it's on the screen.
Well, I'm not sure
He has
that
the actual book, so it's
Page 20.
page 40.
Page 40?
Yeah,
page 40. Okay.
second small paragraph from the
Uh,
bottom.
I'll try
There
to
are
make the
There are many scientists. Is that the one?
Yes, or maybe the last one, Michael J. Behe.
yeah, Michael J. Behe, that's where we are. Is the
Okay.
font a good enough size? Is that a good enough size for everybody?
I have the book, so I don't care.
Okay. Did you want to read first, Rupanuga Prabhu?
Well, I don't care. If you want me to, I will.
The order is myself, Krishna, because it's easier to keep track of everybody. So
Okay.
a matter of fact, I'll even write it down.
That's
So
fine.
it's me, then Krishna Chandra, then Purnaprajna, then you, then Baba Trini if they're finished.
Well, leave it like it is. Leave it.
Okay. And then after that, oh, Jai, our god sister Nanda Patni has come for another session. And um, then after her is, I'm just wondering who is Zoom user. It says Zoom user is after you, but it doesn't say who the Zoom user is. If we want to include them in the reading, if you don't reveal yourself, then we'll just read without including you. Okay, I'll start then. We're reading a page each. And if there's questions after a page, then, please ask them. Michael J. Behe, is that how you pronounce his name? Behe?
I think Bihi.
Behe?
I think so.
Okay. Michael J. Behe is a microbiologist teaching at Lehigh University in Pennsylvania. He was a staunch neo-Darwinist, but then one day, while reading about the flagellum of bacteria, which propels it through a liquid environment, he was amazed to see how it closely resembles an outboard motor. Although only 5 millionth of a centimeter in diameter, it has a universal joint, bushings, stator, rotor, and drive shaft, and even a clutch and braking system. It has been clocked at 100,000 RPM and can reverse directions almost instantaneously. Believing in the theory of abiogenesis, Dr. Behe assumed that there was someone who could tell him how this wonderful nanomachine had evolved. And yet he soon found that no one could even begin to do so, and hardly anyone even offered hand-waving speculations. Darwin's theory says that organisms gradually evolve by a series of random variations or mutations that allow them to better survive. But the flagellum not have evolved because to function at all, it needs all its parts. If you take away a major part, such as the rotor, it won't work. You can't reduce it. The flagellum is irreducibly complex. Bingo, Dr. Behe thought. That encapsulates the problem with Darwin's theory. We recognize the intelligence of others by seeing a purposeful arrangement of parts, such as an automobile or an airplane, a painting, a nice garden, and so on. The flagellum is an example of something with a purposeful arrangement of parts. It is our practical experience that only intelligence and not chance produces a purposeful arrangement of parts, or in other words, irreducible complexity. And oh, by the way, Rupanuga Prabhu or Purnaprajna Prabhu, if either of you want to interrupt us at any point to further develop a certain point, please feel free to do that. Dr. Behe's assertion that such, sorry? Dr. Behe's assertion that such systems of irreducible complexity pointed to intelligent design provoked a backlash. Critics accused Behe of pushing religion and not science. Behe pointed out that his inference to design was based on empirical observation and reasoning and not faith. Over the years, supporters of Darwin's theory have aggressively tried to refute Behe's arguments. Then in 2004, the Dover Area High School in Pennsylvania required the reading of this short statement about evolution in biology class. Quote, because Darwin's theory is a theory, it continues to be tested as new evidence is discovered. The theory is not a fact. Gaps in the theory exist for which there is no evidence. A theory is defined as a well-tested explanation that unifies a broad range of observations. Intelligent design is an explanation of the origin of life that differs from Darwin's view. The reference book of Pandas and People is available for students who might be interested in gaining an understanding of what intelligent design involves. With respect to any theory, students are encouraged to keep an open mind. The school leaves the discussion of the origins of life to individual students and their families, unquote. This statement did not seem to be the stuff that epic battles are made of. But the supporters of Darwin's theory were furious. They insisted that the reading of this statement was an endorsement of religion. The Discovery Institute, which supports intelligent design, asked the school board to retract the statement because they didn't want this to become a political football. Eventually, the ACLU, who is the ACLU?
Civil
American
Liberties Union.
That's a lawyer's organization. Been
Okay,
around a long time.
thank you. Eventually, the ACLU filed suit alleging that the school policy was unconstitutional. But it came to be more than that. The theory of intelligent design was put on trial. As would be expected, evolutionists argued in the courtroom that the flagellum could have evolved by natural selection. And indeed, experts gave arguments for both sides. Microbiologist Scott Minnick, or Minnick, or Minnich,
Minich, I guess.
a professor at the University of Idaho who had conducted lab research on the flagellum, testified on behalf of intelligent design after the trial and the verdict that intelligent design was not science. People went to the president of the university where he taught and tried to get them fired, saying that he was incompetent. So I'd just like to stop there. This reminds me at the beginning of Drita Karma and Sadaputa Prabhu's book, Forbidden Archaeology, in which they state that this knowledge filter is existing in the science world, and if you say anything sacrilegious against Darwinism, then you lose your job, you lose your tenure, you lose it all. Rupanuga, would you like to comment, or Purnaprajna, Prabhu?
Well, this is the beginning of a section that shows just that, how it's something like politics, that the Darwinists are the party in power, and if anyone tries to put forward an opposing view, then they're harassed, fired, blasphemed, ridiculed, etc. Cancel culture.
Ah, good example of cancel culture. Uh-huh.
They weaponized it. They weaponized science. They politicized science. Actually, science comes from the root word, scire, the Latin word, which means to know. It doesn't mean perhaps or maybe, or it's not theoretical. It means fact. So science is designed in such a way that there may be a proposal, there may be a hypothesis, but the method includes a demonstration. So what we've been hearing for so long is theory. Theory has to change by a demonstration. That's how things become they're called laws. So we don't find that the Darwin's theory is called a law because it really hasn't been demonstrated scientifically. Although it's taught in schools, especially in grade schools and high schools, as fact, as if it's a law of nature. But actually, it's not been proven to be a law of nature. So they're really not practicing science. They call themselves scientists, but as Shobha pointed out, science requires demonstration. It requires fact, not simply hypothesis.
But it seems that if the Darwinists or atheists make a big enough stink, they can shut everything down.
Well, they have so many things on their side. You know, the recent events in society have shown that the media is prejudiced, and many politicians are prejudiced. So how are you going to get straight information to the public? They'll give the public what they want the public to know. They restrict people, they ban people, they remove people who are speaking differently than the agenda. So that's true in science.
So people are fearful to speak up.
Well, it's just like now, people lost their job because they wouldn't get the jab.
Yeah,
Okay.
same scenario. Krishna Chandra Prabhu, it's your turn.
Prabhu.
Evolutionary biologist.
Evolutionary biologist Dr. Richard von Sternberg, editor of a scientific journal affiliated with the prestigious Smithsonian Museum of Natural History, published an article by Dr. Stephen C. Meyer, former professor of the philosophy of science and one of the leaders of the intelligent design movement. The article created a firestorm of controversy merely because it suggested that intelligent design might be able to explain how life began. Dr. Sternberg's political and religious beliefs were investigated, and he was pressured to resign.
Wow.
Dr. Sternberg said the questioning of Darwinism was going too far for many, but the mentioning of intelligent design at the end of the article was over the top. I think that the intelligent design people have raised some important questions, and I wanted to put them on the table. People were so upset that they had physical, emotional reactions. They said that Stephen C. Meyer is a well-known Christian, a proponent of intelligent design, and a Republican. It was all cast in terms of religion and politics. The way that the chairman of the department put it was that I was viewed as an intellectual terrorist because I gave intelligent design some modicum of credibility. Neurosurgeon Dr. Michael Egnor, a professor at the State University of New York, wrote an essay for high school students saying that doctors didn't need to study evolution to practice medicine. The Darwinists were quick to react. Dr. Egnor: a lot of people in various walks of life called me unprintable names. There was a lot of very, very nasty comments. I realized that when I went public with my doubts about Darwin's theory, there would be criticism, but what amazed me was the viciousness. In 2001, about 500 PhD scientists signed their names to this statement. We are skeptical of claims for the ability of random mutation and natural selection to account for the complexity of life. Careful examination of the evidence for Darwinian theory should be encouraged. Now there are more than 1,000 signers to this dissent statement, and the list is growing. After giving a talk at Syracuse University, Dr. James Tour took questions. Someone asked, conflict can be good for science. How is this playing out with the things you are saying and the establishment or origin of life community? Dr. Tour: the origin of life community is not happy with what I'm saying. The question is, do they welcome this conflict? The answer is no, not at all. Scientists are people. Suppose I had been working on a theory for 30 years, and then someone publishes a paper that disproves it. I'm naturally going to be very defensive of my theory. I would not say, I am so happy that you found the defect of my theory. What a relief. I am so glad that you wrote the paper saying that my theory doesn't work. I feel so much better today. That doesn't happen because scientists are also people. The other thing I can tell you is what has happened in my own career. I signed the dissent statement in 2001, and this has affected my career in many ways. I have not been allowed into certain societies of science. I point out to them that they have certain requirements for getting in, and that I have more of these requirements than the people getting in. I said, you know what? You know that, rather. I have so many publications and I have so many citations where my papers have been quoted. You can measure this. Their reply to me was, "Oh, so you have more than twice as much of the requirements as those who are getting in, but you will never get in because when you signed the dissent statement, it was political." I said, "Oh, that was political. What made it political?" "All I said was that further research was warranted. You are the one that is saying that in is political. And in your society, 99% agree with you. And the 1% that agree with me are old and dying off. They were admitted into your society before this became critical. Soon you will have 100%. And so you can say our society is unanimous on this. But this is meaningless because it is self-selecting. You only select those that agree with you."
I'd just like to bring a point to Rupanuga and Purnaprajna Prabhu for their comment um, regarding the statement, "I'm so happy that you disprove my theory." Jiva Goswami comments how there's three different levels of debate. The Vada debate is between two people who are eager to be defeated because they want to have a higher truth. And I'm equating that with the mode of goodness, or maybe Jiva Goswami does. And that's called a Vada debate. Then the Jalpa debate is where one person is trying to show off how they are the better debater. And so I'm equating that with the mode of passion. And then the Vitanda debate is in the mode of ignorance, where one party uses ad hominem to destroy the other person, and there's no ammo. They have no actual philosophy or means by which to defeat the person. They go below the belt. So I was thinking, because the atheists are situated in the mode of ignorance and passion, then therefore they can't deal with a person presenting sattvic arguments. There's someone that's echoing back and forth, and I was that's related to my first. Can someone mute themselves because they're going back and forth? This is related to the first thing that jumped out at me, and that how some people have physical and emotional reactions when they hear about intelligent design. I'm thinking, wow, they actually become like triggered or almost traumatized to hear about the existence of a supreme intelligence behind the creation. And so I'm thinking of this verse by Krishna, Icha Dvesha Samutena Dvandva Mohina Bharata, that all living entities are born into desire and hate. So I guess people's hatred of Krishna, their envy of Krishna, is so deeply rooted that even the suggestion of the idea of Krishna existing and manifesting and controlling everything causes them to react physically and emotionally. I was wondering if you'd like to make a comment on that, Rupanuga or Purnaprajna Prabhu.
Well, actually, they're simply defending their freedom for sense gratification. You see, Darwin's theory implies that there's no morality. You see, there's no God, there's no morality. There's no right or wrong. It's up to you, whatever you want. So that's what's a disturbance. They're thinking that this philosophy is a limitation. It's imposing upon us our freedom for sense gratification. That's what it's all about. So that's the basic mentality of an atheist.
Mm-hmm.
He likes atheism because it allows him to do what he likes. There's no prohibition to behavior. He can do what he wants.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they're afraid of, because it's really an issue between theism and atheism.
Mm-hmm.
You see, this kind of science, that's why Srila Prabhupada said, these scientists are the greatest enemies of mankind.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very strong statement. He said also, these scientists, these material scientists, these Darwinists specifically, are our greatest grief. I mean, that's quite a statement coming from our spiritual master, and should enlighten us as to our task, because anything that causes such grief to Srila Prabhupada, but to speak of being the enemy of all mankind, is the arch enemy of Vaishnavism.
Well, that's a wonderful point, that we should want to relieve Prabhupada of his grief.
Yes, that was a whole point about BI.
The purpose of BI is to relieve Srila Prabhupada of his grief.
And to relieve the people in general of this misleading propaganda. Because the idea, there's only one life, and we're born to die. So what do you do between birth and death? You enjoy like you can, as much as you can, because the obituaries are filled with people under 50 years old, and everybody knows there's no guarantee. So let's get out there, eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we may die.
Right.
And that's the morality of Darwinism.
Thank you. Purnaprajna Prabhu, do you have something to add to that?
Only that I think the atheists are so convinced that the idea of a God, such a big, big person, is so absurd to them that when someone suggests it in science, they just become outraged. I don't know. So it's hard for me to identify with them.
I have another comment, if I may.
Please.
The problem is that these modern scientists are having a trouble with a cell, with a human cell, one cell, which they can magnify over 100,000 times with electron microscope. They look into the microscope and they can't understand where the information came from. That brings about all the complexity. It's like a small city in there. So they wonder where does this information come from? What they're really saying is, where is this program coming from? And who's the programmer? Where is the programming coming from? So they want to deny higher intelligence, but at the same time, to make their laboratory, to make their experiments, to make their hypothesis, they use their intelligence at every moment.
Mm-hmm.
But for them to admit that there's a higher intelligence than their own, they can't do that.
Mm-hmm.
They won't admit that this cell, we can't duplicate this. We can't even repeat any part of it, but it's obviously coming from a higher intelligence, which they cannot admit, because as soon as you say intelligence, you mean person. Nobody has any experience of a disembodied intelligence.
Right.
So as soon as you say a higher intelligence, then you have a higher being.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have a higher being than a human being. And what being is higher than a human being, but a supreme being? And there you got God, you see. So they do anything to avoid admitting that the reason they can't explain with their own intelligence what intelligence is behind that is because that intelligence is much, much higher than they can imagine.
And that they're accountable to somebody.
Well, that's the morality. There's no morality, you see,
Mm-hmm.
with their theory.
But Purnaprajna Prabhu, didn't you, the other day when we read your book, there was a comment by Richard Dawkins where he said, yes, there may be beings like aliens or something that have higher intelligence. What was that comment about?
The idea was first proposed by Francis Crick, the co-discoverer of the DNA structure. He realized that the cell and the DNA was too complex to have been randomly organized on the Earth. So he thought, well, it must have been brought here by aliens and planted on the Earth. But then that just brings the question of the origin of life to another place. Well, how did they come to exist?
But Richard Dawkins was willing to accept that, to consider that?
Oh, yeah, Dawkins, he was interviewed by Ben Stein, and he was suggesting that. So Ben Stein said, you're ready to accept a intelligent designer, but not God as an intelligent designer. Anyone else you're really ready to accept, but not God.
So in other words, he was willing to accept an intermediate cause, but not an ultimate cause.
Well, they don't want to go to the ultimate. They're just looking for, Prabhupada said that many times, they're just working in the middle. They're not trying to address what is the original cause.
Right.
Can we read more? Because our reading will become much less.
Yeah, it's your turn now to read. I was just going to ask if you could.
So James' tour is continuing. So my views are not welcome at all. And this has affected my career in many ways, in terms of promotion and also being in charge of certain, because people say, oh, the guy doesn't believe in evolution. He shouldn't be there. Why is evolution cast in terms of belief? Nobody ever says the guy doesn't believe in chemistry. This use of the word belief means that they put this in the terms of religion. He doesn't believe in evolution as if it is a religion. They themselves confess that it is a religion, saying that it is all about belief. What does that have to do with all my work as a chemist? Clearly, the evidence is the same, but according to their worldview, scientists interpret the evidence differently, and thus they are engaged in a heated conflict. The debate will never end because it is impossible to go back in time to see whether life randomly evolved from a primordial soup or not. The problems Darwinian scientists face while viewing reality from their perspective was discussed by the late Philip E. Johnson when he gave a talk in Cardiff, Wales. Some of his talk is paraphrased here. Richard Dawkins, one of the foremost modern proponents of neo-Darwinism, states the issue admirably in his book, The Blind Watchmaker. He begins his book by saying, biology is the study of complicated things that give the appearance of having been designed for a purpose. Is it possible that they look that way because that's what they are? Dawkins says, no, that is out of the question. So, you can see something like my book was obviously designed. It didn't randomly form. So Dawkins says, the cell looks so wonderfully designed, but no, that's out of the question. Why is it out of the question? Because he's an atheist. His worldview doesn't allow it.
Mm-hmm.
Francis Crick, the co-discoverer of the structure of DNA, wrote, biologists must constantly keep in mind that what they see was not designed, but rather evolved. This is Rupanuga's favorite quote. He's saying, scientists, you have to be brainwashed. It looks designed, but you always have to remember, no, it wasn't designed, it evolved. So that is the problem. How did this design appear without a designer? That is the problem which Dawkins says science must solve. Dawkins went on to write, physics books may be complicated, but the objects and phenomena that a physics book describe are simpler than a single cell in the body of its author. And the author consists of trillions of such cells organized with intricate architecture and precision engineering into a working machine capable of writing a book. Each nucleus of a cell contains a digitally coded database larger in information content than all 30 volumes of the Encyclopedia Britannica. That just for one of the trillions of cells. How did it all come about without a designer? The answer, according to Dawkins, natural selection. Nevertheless, he concludes, yet the living result of natural selection has overwhelmingly impressed us with the appearance of design as if by a master watchmaker. So it must be said that Dawkins has admirably presented the crux of the problem very candidly. Neo-Darwinism seeks to explain how we got design without the designer. Natural selection requires a great number of small steps to lead eventually to a change of species. But since these steps have never been detailed, many consider natural selection to be a just so story. Okay, I'll stop there.
Okay, Rupanuga Prabhu, would you like to continue?
Okay. In 2015, Stephen Meyer debated Peter Atkins, an atheist and retired professor of chemistry at the University of Cambridge. Stephen Meyer talked about the coded information in DNA and how, from our experience, such information must have been purposefully arranged. He asked whether that observation can be made into a rigorous scientific argument. The fundamental question is, what is the origin of the information stored in the spine of the DNA? Interviewer: freedom of thought is stifled in the scientific community. Stephen Meyer: yes. Instead of responding to the arguments we're making, we get name calling and the accusation that we are religion masquerading as science. Interviewer: Peter, do you feel that the intelligent design can be accepted as genuine scientific inquiry? Peter Atkins says, there's no science at all involved in it. A lot of name calling does go on for a very good reason, but I will address the issues. Stephen Meyer says that information always arises from an intelligent source. He says that information cannot arise spontaneously, but that's absolutely wrong. There are innumerable examples of structure emerging without an agent. Information encoded in DNA is just such a kind of structure. Stephen Meyer: the way you talk about the structure and information is an equivocation, meaning ambiguous language meant to conceal the truth. There are lots of structures that arise spontaneously, but here we are talking about functionally specified digital information. Peter Atkins: structures include information. Information can grow without an agent. The fact that DNA is a sequence of bases is simply a physical way of carrying information, and it has grown through evolution. Stephen Meyer: there is a distinction between order and information. I accept that when energy flows through a system, it can produce order, the kind of order you find in a spiral wave current or in a vortex, and then it's different from the information found in DNA. The information in DNA is not simply order, but specified complexity. And Peter Atkins: what do you mean by specified complexity? Stephen Meyer: in the DNA molecule, you can see this. The chemical bonds that allow for the structure of the molecule do not determine the sequence of the bases. So, next reader.
Next is Nandapatni.
Let's see. Actually, Gaura, I'm not going to read tonight, if that's okay with you. I'll just
Sure.
listen.
Who is Hari Krishna! Exclamation point. Would you like to read next? I have no idea who that is. Hello? Nobody? Ananda, did you want to read? Okay, Via, would you like to read?
I'll read if you like.
Okay, Peter Atkins, evolution determines that.
Peter Atkins, evolution determines that. Stephen Meyer, that is just an assertion. You have to point to a physical process that is capable of doing the work of sequencing the bases, and the chemical bonds do not account for that. They would allow for any of the four bases. There is no physical or chemical determinism responsible for the order of the bases, providing for the critical information contained in them. Peter Atkins, I don't think that you agree that evolution has occurred on the earth. Yes or no? Comment. Throwing a stone in a pond creates ripples because of natural laws, but these structures are distinct from written or coded instructions, which are also structures but are intelligently composed. Thus, there is a clear distinction between the two, and yet to ignore the argument made by Stephen Meyer, Peter Atkins claims that both are one and the same. Then, as a diversion, he asks Stephen Meyer point blank whether he believes in evolution or not. Stephen Meyer, none of the theories of evolution have accounted for the information contained in the bases in the spine of the DNA. The term evolution is fraught with ambiguity. Do you mean directed or undirected? Peter Atkins, undirected. Stephen Meyer, no one knows from an evolutionary point of view how life began from chemicals. Peter Atkins, let me make a concession to intelligent design. I must admit that you ask interesting questions such as, how does the eye develop and how is there information in the cell? These are valid questions, and it is up to us Darwinians, materialists, to confront those questions. What we don't want is to be told the answer before we begin, and that's where we diverge. You start with prejudice that it must be God.
I'd just like to stop there for a moment. Purnaprajna, could you please explain what is being referred to as basis here?
What is being referred to? What do you say?
Yeah, can you explain what is being referred to here as the sequence of the bases? What are the bases actually?
Oh, yeah, while reading it, I just realized that although this debate or interview is very interesting to highlight the difference between the two, but actually Stephen Meyer, he doesn't put it in a way that we can understand the real force of the argument. The idea is that the DNA is a very long molecule, and it contains 4 different kinds of nucleotides, 4 variations. And according to the sequence in which they are arranged, it leaves the DNA. I don't, understand the process very well, but and then it's a question that was explained before by Perry Marshall. It's coding and decoding. The sequence of the nucleotides, long sequence, are actually a set of coded instructions. Those are taken, and those instructions are used to manufacture varieties of proteins and enzymes within the cell. So many different proteins are necessary, and according to the arrangement, it's just like in a computer, you have 1 0 1 0 1 0. According to how it's 1 0 0 1 1 0 0 whatever, something comes out. It's an instruction. So in the same way, these 4 things, they give an instruction and it produces a result, a protein or enzyme, thousands or millions of them or whatever. So it's a coded information. It's not just like you throw a stone in a pond and many ripples come. That's also a kind of, information, you could say, or that's kind of a pattern. But this is not a pattern like that. This is like a book where there's instructions. Like you get an instruction manual to build something that comes in pieces. First take this and that and that and that. So this is instructions of how to produce a protein. But this Peter Atkins, defending the theory of neo-Darwinism, he makes no distinction between the two.
Thank you. So Rasangi, I sent you a chat message. Are you able to read or you're busy?
I'm driving.
Okay, thank you. Just let us give us a
Well,
hand. Just give us
tell
a
you when I stop.
just give us a hand signal when you're able to read. Okay.
Okay, okay.
Hari
Thank you
Krishna,
so much.
Hari Krishna, you're next. Are you able to read? Then Zoom user is next. Are you able to read? If not, then Nurhari and Bhavacharini, are you able to read? Okay, then Stoka Krishna Prabhu,
Yes,
are you?
oh, okay, go ahead and let Stoka Krishna read then. And I'll,
Are you available or not, Bhavacharini?
I just sat down and I'm available, but my
Okay,
husband
great.
on his way.
Okay, please read, Bhavacharini.
Okay.
This is, where did we leave off? Does anyone remember exactly?
Says interviewer, but you start from another prejudice that there
Okay,
must be no
thank you.
God.
Okay, there you go, Bhavacharini. Interviewer.
Tell
Interview.
Rupanuga Prabhu that I'm cooking for tomorrow. Okay, I'm going to sleep.
Okay.
Hare Krishna.
But you start from another prejudice, that there must be no God. Peter Atkins. No. I think that we can explain everything without having to invoke supernatural powers. Stephen Myers. Thank you for your concession. We are asking important questions, even though we differ in our definition of science and in our understanding of what constitutes an explanation. Dr. Atkins only accepts an explanation if it is posited with reference to a materialistic process. But for us, we regard the activities of the mind as explanatory. Would you look at the Rosetta Stone and limit yourself to materialistic explanations of rain and wind, and not open yourself to the possibility that mind played a role? Peter Atkins. But mind is material. It is an activity of the brain. Comment. Just because one is a recognized scientist doesn't mean that whatever he or she says is backed by scientific evidence. Scientists say many things that are not at all scientific. Although Dr. Atkins repeats the view of reductionists, his statements that the mind is an activity of the brain is simply an unverified assumption derived from a materialistic worldview. There are many reputed scientists that understand the brain to be the central processing unit of the body that translates the content of the mind, such as thoughts, feelings, attitudes, beliefs, and memories, into complex patterns of nerve cells firing and chemical release. Stephen Meyer. That's a materialistic precept on your part. The debate here is not about the facts. Both sides agree on the facts. The disagreement is how to interpret the facts and what we will allow as possible explanations of those facts. There are two distinct points of view, and the public should be aware of this. Peter Atkins. Why invoke intelligence in this field, but not in other sciences, such as the theory of relativity? Stephen Meyer. The answer is simple. The theory of relativity simply explains how the laws of nature work and not who designed them. We are talking about the origin of life and the origin of information in the DNA, and so intelligence is one possible explanation. Peter Atkins. All sciences are interconnected. No science is an island, so to speak. That's true of biology. Intelligent design doesn't fit into the reticulation of science. We are looking for universal laws of nature that explain what we see. Stephen Meyer. Intelligent design simply deals with an inference derived from the evidence. Information, as opposed to mere order, does arise from intelligence. After accepting evolutionary ideas, I came to the idea of intelligent design because of the evidence. Peter Atkins. But that doesn't fit into the reticulation of science, in parentheses, the standard practice of science. We are looking for laws of nature that, being allowed to run their course, produce this wonderful world that we have inherited. Stephen Meyer. The critical thing here is that science is the search for truth. And what we are arguing is that there is evidence for intelligent design. The rules of science should not be applied in such a way that prevents scientists from searching for the truth and from considering whatever explanation provides the best account of the evidence we are looking at. There's a clear distinction between the symmetry order that Professor Atkins is talking about and the asymmetrical sequences of characters you find in a message text. Whether you're talking about DNA or a computer code, it's just an equivocation he keeps coming back to again and again. Peter Atkins, that's absolutely wrong. There's absolutely wrong. I think that the Discovery Institute, headed by Dr. Meyer, should close its doors because it is obviously based upon a falsity. Interviewer, what causes this backlash against your organization? Stephen Meyer, we're talking to people having a strong pre-commitment to atheism or materialism. They don't like that we are challenging the self-serving rules of science that they use to shut down the debate. They do not allow the interesting questions that we are raising to be discussed.
Rupanuga Prabhu, do you have any comments on this section, Rupanuga Prabhu?
Yes, I definitely do. You see, the argument is just a bunch of Prajalpa. It's been going on for decades and decades. What the people are arguing or ignoring is that it takes intelligence to argue. It takes intelligence for the scientist to set up his lab. It takes intelligence for the scientist to make a theory. It takes intelligence for the scientist to write a paper. So intelligence is there all the time. But they choose to deny it when they're looking at the cell. Everywhere else, intelligence is there. They using their own intelligence to argue. So they cut intelligence out. But intelligence is always there. But they won't leave it there when it comes to analyzing the information or the activities going on in the cell. They leave it out because they won't admit a higher intelligence than their own. See, once you start talking about intelligence involved with everything, then when it comes to something you can't solve, something you can't understand, like the intricate workings of a single cell, then lo and behold, you have to admit that there's an intelligence higher. And a higher intelligence implies a higher personality. You can't have a person without intelligence. And so as soon as you get on that level, they're going to back away because they first of all can't admit that there's a higher intelligence than their own, or that intelligence is a necessary factor in everything they do. It's like leaving out consciousness. How can you do that? You can't leave out intelligence either. Oh, they couldn't walk, they couldn't talk, they couldn't do anything. So obviously there's an intelligence involved here. Whether they attribute it to God or not, they can just say a superior intelligence.
Bavatrini, I'm going to mute you. There's a lot of noise. Thank you, Rupanuga Prabhu.
It wasn't us, I was already muted.
Nirhari, and no, I said Rasangi. I did not say you.
I thought you said.
Nirhari, you had your hand up. Did you want to respond?
Yeah, and those few lines, there's Atkins that talks about the beautiful design of nature. I mean, probably used to say, who's nature? And even if it's just nature, then what is it? It's an amorphous intelligence, whole nature. So I just thought it's funny. The argument seems that it will go around and around and around because it's a established for them that there is no God. The points are great, though. I mean, they're necessary to be put out there for people to know.
But I
Bavatrini?
actually raised my hand because my question is, this whole thing is based on the origin of life. So without proof, without any scientific proof, they're saying that life has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And actually, life is eternal. So the whole thing seems like based on a false premise that they never addressed,
Who's a prejudice?
or prejudice. And then my other, you know how they're always, I didn't know about the group. I don't know how new the higher intelligent group is, but I was listening to Einstein a few years ago on a radio show, and he said that that all his studies, he come to the conclusion that there was a higher intelligence. He actually said that everything he's learned proves the existence of God.
Wow.
Yeah, but his cousin, a famous doctor and scientist, he had a conference with the one that owns the intellectual rights to Einstein, and they claimed he was
Professor Godfrey,
Professor Godfrey.
ex-dean of the University of Israel.
He claimed that Einstein was an agnostic, and also, but he wasn't. And also, my uncle worked with him for 12 years, so I know from that he was actually, he believed in God.
Your uncle was a scientist or a doctor?
He was a mathematician. My uncle, he worked with Einstein for 12 years.
What was his name?
I forgot his first name. It was Lowenheim.
Okay. Thank you.
First name.
Shall we continue? You didn't get a chance to read yet, Nurhari Prabhu.
Okay.
Peter Atkins.
That's not true. We're also interested in all these fascinating questions. Interviewer. Then why are papers discussing this not allowed? Peter Atkins. Because they are outside the standard procedures of science. Stephen Meyer. There we have it, the definitional convention. What is empirical science? Paul Davis is a physicist from England, currently teaching at Arizona State University. He received his PhD from University College, London, and did postdoctoral research under the direction of Fred Hoyle. He has written many books and papers and is also well known as a broadcaster. He has many interests and is a member of the Advisory Council of METI, Messaging Extraterrestrial Intelligence. He has written books on many subjects, including the origin of life. Dr. Paul Davis gave a talk about origin of life at the Wisconsin Institute of Discovery in 2013. Part of his talk is paraphrased herein. People often ask me what probabilities are of there being life on other planets. I have no way of knowing because we do not know the process whereby non-life is transformed into life. You would only know the odds if you knew what the mechanism is. We don't know what that process is, the process of turning chemicals into life. We could imagine that the circumstances to turn chemicals to life are so daunting that it could only happen once. Or we could imagine that life emerges naturally as part of some self-organizing tendency in nature. We don't know. But somehow or other, a chemical mixture transform itself into life. I have my own view about how that might have happened. There are two ways of investigating, experiment and theory. Naturally, since life evolved from chemicals, you would first go to a chemist for an answer. Miller made amino acids in a wheat, and so people wonder, quote, what could be made in 1 million years? Unquote. You would think that after almost 70 years, there will be a lot of progress in prebiotics and synthesis, but you can't get very far. All that can be done in the synthesis of 1 or 2 building blocks. You don't explain the Empire State Building by explaining how you get bricks. What goes on in cells is stupendously complex, mind-boggling complex. Even the simplest bacteria, the gulf between the building blocks and the cell is staggeringly complex. The gap is colossal. The problem that separates physics, chemistry, and biology is information. The language of physics, chemistry is matter. Atoms, molecules, forces, energy, and reactions. Biologists use the language of information. Thus, they are in conceptually different universes, and so it is hard to see how they fit together. The distinctive quality of life is information processing and information management, and not chemistry. Chemistry explains the hardware, but life is about the software. Thus, to explain the origin of life, we must explain the hardware and the software. Since hardware was there since the beginning, how did hardware produce software? When there is replication in a cell, for example, there is not merely a replication of the hardware, but also the software. Crystals copy themselves by the laws of chemistry and can only make the same crystals, but the DNA code could make anything. According to the arrangement of nucleotides, it makes a specific pattern of amino acids. The product gotten is not implicit in the laws of physics and chemistry, but is independent of those. Another point is that the software of information in DNA doesn't just sit there, it does something.
Any comments from you, Rupanuga, Purnaprajna, before we continue?
My comments come in the next part of the book that this Dr. Davies, on the one hand, he admits that it's inconceivable how it could have happened. And it's so complex and it's just impossible to imagine, but still, he just assumes, but still it happened. Chemicals somehow combined to create life. So that's the problem, is that because his worldview is that, he must be an atheist. So for an atheist, there's only one possible explanation. The universe began, it was so hot, the earth formed from gases, gradually it solidified, and then after a long time, became covered with water, and then there were certain chemical reactions, and then somehow or other, they combined to make the first cell. That's the only thing they can imagine. If there's no God, no controller, no intelligence, no designer, that's the only thing left.
Mm-hmm.
But evolution is actually described by Srila Prabhupada. He's described, there is an evolution. And that evolution is from subtle to gross.
Mm-hmm.
He says in the beginning, he said, there was space. And from space came air. And from air, you came, like the clashing of clouds, comes electricity, fire. And from fire comes water. And the water, then the earth. So these evolution of gross elements actually occur over a long period of time. And he gives an example like when you hear thunder, immediately it's followed by lightning.
Mm-hmm.
So the thunder sound that we hear is the clashing of heavy clouds and the rubbing together, the mashing together creates fire or electricity. And that's how things were described initially. See, it's still happening on that level in an ordinary thunderstorm. So, and then there's also a description in Shastra about the evolution of the senses that accompany, that also are parallel with the individual gross elements as they appear. For example, fire means form. And form, just like your eyes work on heat and light. So when your eyes are tired, if you put a cold compress on them to relieve the heat, they become overheated. See, so each of the gross elements along with him is created one of the senses in order to sense that element. You see, so this is evolution is described by Srila Prabhupada in Shastra, but that's not the evolution they're talking about. There is an evolution, and it takes a long time for that to happen. But that is already programmed. That program is there from the actual appearance of the universe. And they say the Big Bang, but where did the ingredients of the Big Bang come from? You see, they don't talk about where the chemicals came from. You see, and they were evolved. They were created in a program that every universe's program unfolds. So the Big Bang comes from. They don't talk about where the chemicals came from.
Thank you. Stoka Krishna Prabhu, are you still busy? Otherwise, Via, can you read next, and then Prairie after Via?
I can read.
Excellent. Thank you, Via.
Thank you.
Okay. Here we are. It is interesting to know.
Okay. It is interesting to note that Dr. Davies is not one of the prominent spokespersons for neo-Darwinism. He has a vast array of varied interests, and so his comments about abiogenesis are not ideologically motivated, but purely objective. As you can see, he frankly admits that scientists have no idea of how a living cell could have first formed from non-living chemicals. Of course, perhaps due to his worldview, he assumes that this did somehow happen, but his talk contains no empirical evidence of how it actually happened. He faithfully admits that the cell is astonishingly complex and works in such a way as to leave the researcher puzzled. He hints at the essential question which neo-Darwinists and others cannot answer. How did coded information appear in the spine of the DNA? The dogma of mainstream science is scientism, or the belief that observational science can explain everything. The late Stephen Jay Gould, a prominent Darwinian evolutionist, once said, "Science incorporates all of factual reality. If something is proposed outside what we can perceive, we say that it doesn't exist. It only exists within the mind." Again, from an ancient Sanskrit text dealing with logic, there is the theory of a frog in a well. There once was a frog living in a well, and one day another frog came to visit. He had come from the ocean, and when he described it, the frog in the well asked, "Is it twice as big as this well?" "No, it is much bigger." As the frog in the well continued to ask, "Is it 4 times as big?" and so on. He puffed up his stomach more with each inquiry until it burst. Scientists are very small beings standing on the shore of the ocean of truth. Their senses of perception are extremely limited and imperfect, and so the knowledge derived from them is certainly very small part of the big picture. For a scientist to say that anything beyond his perception does not exist is utterly foolish. It is a kind of insanity for persons to think that they can understand everything by their tiny research. If they can understand to some degree how nature is working, it is commendable. But why do they foolishly pretend to know how the universe began and how life originated on Earth? If someone cannot remember very well what he or she did yesterday, how can we believe their proclamations about what happened billions of years ago? Since Darwin since Darwin, the mood of the established practice of science has become distinctly atheistic. Karl Popper, 1902 to 1994, was perhaps the most influential philosopher of science in the 20th century, desiring to free science from what he considered pseudoscience, as well as from everything that claimed to be metaphysical. Popper proposed that real science only deals with that which is falsifiable, meaning only that which could be confirmed. And this view became universally accepted and remains so today.
Wait a
It is
minute.
on this
Your word skipped a bit, or something got cut out. Meaning only that which could be confirmed or rejected.
Meaning only that which could be confirmed or rejected by observation and experimentation. This view became universally accepted and remains so today. It is on this basis that any discussion of any possibility of there being an intelligent designer is at once rejected as pseudoscience by the mainstream evolutionary scientists. Why? Because the existence of the designer cannot be verified or falsified by the observations of our blunt senses. If science only deals with that which is falsifiable, then why do so-called scientists speculate upon that which is beyond their powers of observation? Their speculations as to how life began billions of years ago are not falsifiable. And so why do they impudently claim that their so-called theories and research are science? The scientific method is defined as a method of research in which a problem is identified. In this case, the origin of life or the formation of the first living cell. Relevant data is gathered by observation, whether in nature or in the laboratory. A hypothesis is formulated from the data. In this case, abiogenesis, and the hypothesis is empirically demonstrated. Scientists must at least substantiate the theory of abiogenesis by creating a living cell in the laboratory.
Do you have any questions about what you just read, Via?
No, I'm still absorbing everything I just read. It was so much information. It's so crazy how little we know about, even a cell, and then, we're so or not us, but atheists or atheistic scientists, but they're so ready to, what's the word? To just cancel God, from, everything just came from, it's so crazy. Everything can't come from nothing. Even the Big Bang Theory, even if people want to, focus on that and believe in that, someone had to make that happen. Nothing can't come from nothing, everything can come from nothing. Yeah, it's crazy. And I think real science is learning that, the more we learn about something as small, something like a cell, how much is happening even within a cell, the more we learn that we have so much to learn. People say oh, we went to the moon, we're doing this and that, but we don't even know about 70% of our own oceans or something. It's crazy.
Rupanuga Prabhu, do you have anything to comment on this?
Well, I think if the electron microscope existed at the time of Darwin, this theory wouldn't have gotten off the ground. It's too complex. And it's obviously purposeful, repetitive, reproductive, reciprocal. It duplicates itself. There's so much cause and effect. There's so much order involved. And yet, they never have any experience of that, which can be done without intelligence. It all boils down to their refusal to recognize the obvious. That means that they're prejudiced. That means that they're preconceived. That means that they don't want to see the truth. They avoid it, even though it's a fact of perception. Their limited senses are there, that's true, but they won't even use their limited senses. They can see, they can see it all happening under their microscope. Yeah.
Prabhupada said they are not even common sense men.
No, they're not. It's like he called the Mayavadis, they're causeless reluctance. That's what they have, causes, but it is caused by their atheism. They're reluctant to admit what they're seeing, what they're sensing with their own senses. They won't admit it. It's a kind of insanity.
Prairie, can you read next, please?
Yes.
Thank you. Evolutionary scientists.
Evolutionary scientists have tried their best for a century and a half, but have utterly failed to demonstrate that living organisms, somehow assembled by a random, unguided process from non-living chemicals. Where is the proof? There is no proof. Then why do those who insist that life evolved from chemicals continue to proclaim this to be a fact? It appears that empirical evidence is secondary and ideology or worldview is primary. Dr. John Lennox is Professor Emeritus of Mathematics at the University of Oxford and Emeritus Fellow of Mathematics and the Philosophy of Science at Green Templeton College, Oxford University. Recently, he gave a talk at the University of California, Los Angeles, and some of what he said is paraphrased here. Today, there are many quite vocal scientists who say that science has abolished God. Stephen Hawking said, "You have to choose between science and God." This is odd because Sir Isaac Newton was not an atheist. He was famously a believer in God. How is it that the pioneers of science, Galileo, Kepler, Newton, and Clerk Maxwell, were believers in God while today Hawking says that you must choose between science and God? I want to clear up some fog because there is a lot of intellectual confusion around this debate. The misunderstanding is that often people think that there is a conflict between a belief in God and science. That cannot be. In 2013, Peter Higgs, an atheist, won the Nobel Prize for Physics. And in 1997, William Daniel Phillips, a Christian, won the same Nobel Prize. There was no difference between them as scientists, but one was a Christian and the other an atheist. Therefore, there cannot be any conflict between science and a belief in God. There is a conflict, but it is between the two worldviews, that of an atheist who views everything in terms of naturalism and that of a theist. It is these two views that are in conflict. Thus, the real conflict is between atheism and theism. David Berlinski received his PhD in philosophy from Princeton and later was a postgraduate fellow of molecular biology and mathematics at Columbia University. During an interview by Mark Levin, he explained why Darwinian evolution is more of a substitute for religion than a science. Some of what David Berlinski said is paraphrased here. Something unusual and peculiar has come over Anglo-American life during the last 20 years or so. I have written in defense of religious life because up until now, none has been forthcoming. The discussion has been ceded to men who regard religion with frivolous contempt. Their books, although of differing styles, all have the same message. Because scientific theories are true, religious beliefs must be false. During the 50s and 60s, a kind of cheerful agnosticism was tolerated in the academic world, and the issue didn't vex anyone in the scientific community profoundly. Now it has all changed. A very vociferous and dogmatic atheism has become obligatory in the scientific community. Of course, there are exceptions, but there will always be exceptions. But by and large, atheism has replaced any kind of tolerance, and thus the religious traditions dating back thousands of years are objects of faint decision. This has become accelerated force in intellectual life. If one is a devout Christian, Jew, or whatever, it is not a particularly good idea to go to one's scientific fraternity brothers and broadcast this. It's best to keep one's mouth closed. That is generally true. No scientific theory
Question or
touches.
comment on what? That's good. That was a whole page. Thank you so much for your enthusiasm, Prairie. Any comments or questions on what you just read? Any question for Rupanuga or Purnaprajna or thoughts?
The only thought I have while reading this was a teacher I had in high school. I went to a Catholic high school, and religion class was something the students thought was very dry, and it was very dogmatic. Although my last year of high school, I had an incredible teacher, and she majored in chemistry and theology. And she is a bright, wonderful teacher who actually accelerated my faith more than any religion class I had in that time of my schooling. So I found it to be profound to have both science and religion on the same side instead of working against each other. And that was profound.
Thank you. And comment before
I'd
we...
like to make a comment.
Yes, Prabhu.
I would say that this discussion about the origin of life, this is a small part of the overall battle between theism and atheism against freedom and the New World Order and, whatever you want to call it, the Great Reset. It's related. It's part and it's a segment of the same thing.
Thank you. Devija Garanga, are you able to read? We'll have Sikarani first, and then your next, Devija. Thank you for coming, Veda, our God sister is here.
I'm not sure if my microphone, I don't think it's working too well.
Okay, it's working okay, but Sikarani's next.
Sure.
Thank you. Okay. Sikarani is a graduate of RIT, where all the scientists are, where Yadubar and Vishaka graduated from.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. No scientific.
No scientific theory touches upon the mysteries that religious tradition addresses. If one wants to know why we have been put on this earth, one would not like to turn to the algebraic quantum field theory for an answer. The answers that prominent scientific figures have offered are remarkable in their shallowness. The hypothesis that we are nothing more than cosmic accidents has been widely accepted by the scientific community. Basically, science has nothing to say about life, about love, about death, and about meaning. Everyone should be struck by the wonder of the universe. Why is it there? The answer forthcoming from the physics community is either, well, what do you expect? We are here, or it is a kind of accident. These are not answers that intelligent men and women are searching for. They do not correspond to any deep intellectual need. If one were to ask the physicists, chemists, or biologists, why is there anything at all? Why not nothing? They will answer, we know why, and then give some vague speculation. Mark Levin, they have no real solid idea, do they? And yet they continue to push their theories out as if they are science. David Berlinski, well, let's be fair. Would not you do the same thing if you were a leading physicist? I sure would. If I had a theory that I knew deep down was no good, but I got awards and in emoluments, I would push it for what it's worth too. Mark Levin, let me ask you about Darwin. In reply, David Berlinski described Darwin's theory and then said that it is increasingly being held as a secular doctrine comparable to the book of Genesis. Mark Levin, do you find that most atheists embrace Darwinism? David Berlinski, every last one. Mark Levin, why do they do that? David Berlinski, it's a secular myth. Even atheists need some compelling myth of how he got here and what we are doing here, how we got here. It was an accident. What we are doing here, no idea. What's our purpose? Replicating our genes. It's a very viable myth. People believe it. Again, referring to the late Philip E. Johnson's talk at Cardiff Wells, the part where he spoke about Darwinism theory as a substitute for religion is paraphrased here. Do you want to continue?
It just finished the section.
Harvard geneticist Richard Lewontin is a staunch evolutionist, but he discounts Dawkins. He says, speaking of evolutionary science as against a religious alternative, we take the side of science in spite of the patent absurdity of some of its theories, and in spite of the tolerance of the scientific community for unsubstantiated just so stories, because we have a prior commitment, a commitment to materialism. It is not that the methods and institutions of science compel us to accept a material explanation of the phenomenal world, but on the contrary, we are forced by our prior adherence to material causes to create an apparatus of investigation and a set of concepts that produce material explanations, no matter how counterintuitive they are, no matter how mystifying they are to the uninitiated.
Vijay Garanga Prabhu, are you able to read next?
I'll give it a shot. Let me know if you have problems hearing me, okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
He's saying that the starting point for him and his kind of scientists is the concept of philosophic materialism. That is to say, they have a new creation story. In the beginning were the particles and the impersonal laws of nature, and everything evolved from them. There was no God. He says, quote, we cannot allow a divine foot in the door because that would allow the possibility of miracles, and we don't want anything to do with that. End quote. If that is the case, then something like Darwinism has to be the explanation for the existence of life. They've put God out of the picture and have a purposeless, unguided existence. This is not an empirical finding. It's a logical deduction from their worldview. Still, they must account for the complex biological systems that appear to be designed, and so they need a designer substitute. That is natural selection. This must be true if the philosophy of materialism is true. Therefore, if you are a confirmed materialist and define science as applied materialism, as Dawkins does, and as scientists are generally taught to do in our culture, then that's it. It's Darwinism or nothing. For such persons, the purpose of science is to shore up the theory of evolution, and therefore scientists look through the evidence for something to support it.
Please continue.
The evidence points towards intelligence and away from randomness. Those who are adamantly opposed to the possibility of a higher intelligence at work in nature will unwaveringly stick to reductionism or scientific materialism. Although it is now understood that genomes restructure themselves in real time, a primary argument against abiogenesis was the utter impossibility that amino acids could randomly combine to form the first protein. From the website evolution.faq.com, the probability of a 300 molecule long protein forming by total random chance would be approximately 1 chance in 10 to the 390. My eyes aren't that good.
Yep.
That's a big number. This were written out, it would take 3 or 4 pages of zeros after the 10. This number is astoundingly huge. Furthermore, a protein molecule of 288 amino acids is a rather modest one compared with some giant protein molecules consisting of thousands of amino acids. When we apply similar probability calculations to these giant protein molecules, we see that even the word impossible is insufficient to describe the true situation. Quote, when we proceed one step further in the theorized evolution of a cell, we observe that one single protein means nothing by itself. One of the smallest bacteria ever discovered, Mycoplasma hominis H39, contains 600 types of proteins. In this case, we would have to repeat the probability calculations we have made above for one protein for each of these 600 different types of proteins. The result beggars even the concept of impossibility. Some people may suspect that these numbers are exaggerated and do not reflect the true facts. That is not the case. These are definite and concrete facts. No evolutionist can object to these numbers. They accept that the probability of the coincidental formation of a single protein is as unlikely as the possibility of a monkey writing the history of humanity on a typewriter without making any mistakes. However, instead of accepting the other explanation, which is opposed to chance or random interaction of molecules, they go on defending this impossibility. Although the random formation of even a single protein is statistically impossible, George Wald, who received his PhD in zoology from Columbia University and won the Nobel Prize for Medicine in 1967, famously commented, quote, "Given so much time, the impossible becomes possible, the possible probable, and the probable virtually certain. One has only to wait. Time itself performs the miracles."
And any comment from you, Rupanuga, Purnaprajna, Prabhu's?
Yeah, I'm just thinking about the human eye, which the human eyeball, which gave Darwin a little trouble. The problem with natural selection and mutations and all that is that all the components of the eyeball would have to evolve at the same time in a parallel fashion to work together, or none of the individual components could survive. So how does all this happen at one time? How does all this complex eyeball come together with everything connected with each other so that they have to survive by their combination at once? It's impossible for that to happen by chance.
I don't know what's more difficult to believe, the fact of how difficult it would have to just happen by chance, or the disbelief of the atheistic mentality that completely rejects it. Both astonishing.
Vedavati, are you able to read next, please?
Yes, I can.
Jai.
Not too noisy. However, given the present understanding of how proteins are formed from the information contained in the spine of the DNA, this view is now out of favor. Dr. James Tour has pointed out that time is actually the enemy of a chemist attempting to synthesize a particular compound. He gave the example of Dr. Eschenmoser, a renowned synthetic chemist who worked for years to synthesize a particular carbohydrate. When he finally succeeded, he quickly isolated the carbohydrate from the other compounds that were created, for otherwise it would soon degrade. Therefore, in nature, even if some of the complex molecules needed for the building of a cell somehow formed, they would quickly degrade without a chemist isolating them. Although Darwinian evolutionary scientists are unable to demonstrate how a living cell could have formed by an unguided process, they use time as an excuse, saying that over a period of billions of years, anything could happen. But as every synthetic chemist knows while working in the laboratory, results must be quickly isolated before they degrade, because time is their enemy. November 7th to 9th, 2016, a conference was organized at the Royal Society of London to discuss the problems faced by neo-Darwinism and was attended by 300 scientists. The Royal Society is arguably the world's most august scientific body. Its founders include Robert Boyle, and it was later headed by Isaac Newton. That such a thoroughly mainstream scientific organization should acknowledge the problems concerning neo-Darwinism is certainly notable. David Shuker from the University of St. Andrews challenged Dennis Noble, Professor Emeritus and co-director of the computational psychology at the University of Oxford, who in his talk had described an experiment wherein scientists had deleted flagella genes from bacteria and yet found that these cells had regenerated their flagella genes in just 4 days and had grown new tails. David Shuker argued that this was an example of how natural selection could rewire genes, but since natural selection is just another way of saying survival of the fittest, he couldn't provide a single detail of how the genes got rewired. Since in the view of neo-Darwinism, it is unthinkable that a cell could act purposely, natural selection always ends up as the answer. In reply, Dennis Noble explained how it was natural genetic engineering that rebuilt the genes, giving the bacteria their flagellum and thus enabling them to find food, and not natural selection. Dr. Noble explained, it's not a question of the data. Everyone agrees on the data. It's about your point of view. I have a point of view that you do not have, and this enables me to see things that you cannot see. In his talk at the conference, James A. Shapiro, professor of biochemistry at the University of Chicago, spoke about how non-random genetic engineering takes place within the cell. He cited evidence which suggests that organisms possess a kind of pre-programmed adaptive capacity. Experiments by Len Margulis, Eva Jablonka, David Prescott, and Mei Wan Ho definitely prove that cells perform non-random adaptations of astonishing sophistication. And yet, neither Dr. Shapiro nor anyone else attempted to explain how the information inherent in such algorithmic control or pre-programmed capacity might have originated.
Haribo.
Should someone else finish?
Empiric evidence proving that random genetic mutations and natural selection were wholly inadequate explanations of the purposeful genetic engineering found in DNA has been with us for a long time. Dr. Barbara McClintock, who won the Nobel Prize for Medicine in 1983, said in her acceptance speech, "In the future, attention undoubtedly will be centered on the genome, with greater appreciation of its significance as a highly sensitive organ of the cell that monitors genomic activities and corrects common errors, senses unusual and unexpected events, and responds to them, often by restructuring the genome." And I have two questions for Purnaprajna and Rupanuga Prabhu. And they are, what is the difference between Darwinism, neo-Darwinism, and what's the genome?
Say that again?
What's the difference between Darwinism and neo-Darwinism, and what is a genome?
Well, the difference between Darwinism and neo-Darwinism is that Darwin didn't understand genetic mutations. They didn't know about the DNA or any of those things.
Uh-huh.
But he just thought it was natural selection plus random variation. You know, just like a man may have many children, they're all a little different. So we just thought, well, different, you know, some were better, more adaptive. And anyway, but with the understanding of the genetic makeup and genetic mutations, then that replaced the idea of just, you know, differences, random differences. So that's why it's called neo-Darwinism, because it includes genetics, which Darwin had an idea of.
So
The idea of genetic mutation.
Mhm.
And genome, I don't know what to say.
Okay.
Just means, you know, I'm not really trained in this field. When I wrote the book, I looked up everything and tried to understand everything as best as possible. But now, after quite some time, I can't really specifically say what. Just means the part of the DNA that determines the structures that arise from it. I don't know.
Quote I have is a genome is an organism's complete set of genetic instructions. Each genome contains all of the information needed to build that organism and allows it to grow and develop. The instructions in our genome are made up of DNA. Within DNA is a unique chemical code that guides our growth, development, and health. And this code is determined by the order of the 4 nucleotide bases that make up DNA: adenine, cytosine, guanine, thymine, ACG, and T for short. So there's a little more information. Yes. Does anyone have any comments or questions from what we read today?
There's one comment I wanted to make.
Sure.
If you can see my T-shirt, it's 2 snowmen. One says, "Don't be ridiculous. Nobody made us. We just evolved naturally from snowflakes." And so actually, a snowman is a very simple construction. But if you see someone made a snowman, you know somebody made it. It didn't just, the snow happened to fall in that way. And compare that to the human body, there's no comparison. And still they think, oh, it just happened randomly.
Great analogy.
Yeah. Oh, okay, so good. Yeah, can I say
Please,
something?
please.
Yeah, a couple of days ago, I was listening to a lecture, Prabhupada's lecture about Gita, 68, like that. Prabhupada speaks about evolution, but how does it happen? He said, we start actually in the water, the aquatics, okay, those are forms, and then we are transmigrating from body to body. There goes aquatics, insects, trees, birds, bees with 2 hands that can operate like that. So there are verses where it shows that. So, but
also told us about evolution.
Oh, okay. Yeah. How is described in the Veda 900,000 species of aquatics. So interesting enough, Prabhupada said we all began. He says we all began. Of course, he always included himself. He didn't come from there, but that it's 900,000 species. So we all began as aquatics. And so we send the pralayas or devastations or part devastations of the universe. Usually get fire, but then inundation or water. And then life begins again as aquatics. But the evolution, how that happens is not that the bodies change.
We change bodies.
We change bodies.
I'd like to make another comment.
Yes, please.
I mean, really, it's this whole Darwinian evolution, it's a propaganda. It's like fake news. You know, I don't want to name any specific news networks, but actually, nobody really believes it because here's something when I meet people sometimes, I ask them, hold your hand out in front of you and tell me, do you think it was designed or did it randomly form? And they'll say, it was designed. As soon as they say that, that's a refutation of Darwin. But still they believe in Darwin because the media, the education, the scientists, pound it in. But everyone I asked admitted, hand looks like it was designed.
Rupanuga Prabhu, you have something you'd like to share? Thank you, Purnaprajna Prabhu.
No, I don't think so. I think the real problem is a problem which we face as preachers, wanting to share with other conditioned souls what we've learned from Srila Prabhupada. We find that their conditioned souls are doubly conditioned by their education, and which they've been bombarded with since they were children. And it's very difficult for them to host anything new, any new ideas. So it's an indoctrination that's so complete. And it fits in with the Kali Yuga program of the demonic tendencies in this age. And as Shiva Baba said, the whole thing's controlled by Rakshasas. So we should not be surprised that people are in lockstep with their education, in lockstep with their desire for sense gratification. And the whole thing is pushing people to extremes, extreme sports, extreme fads, and folks covering themselves with tattoos, and so many different things going on that are in the mode of passion and ignorance, especially ignorance. What's going to happen with all that poison that's stuck in the skin when they get older? I have no idea, but I don't think they do either. So it's so built in. Like Shubhapa said, it's like crying in the wilderness. It's like, it's folly to be wise where ignorance is bliss. But we have to keep at it, because by chanting the holy name, by going on the Harinam, by chanting japa, we're just filling the atmosphere with vibrations that rotate around the planet eternally. They never stop. And that's how purification happens. That's how Lord Chaitanya's movement becomes more and more visible, through sound vibration. The whole material world started with sound, and the spiritual world is based on sound. We have to bring the spiritual world through sound, through chanting, through Shubhava's lectures, especially, where the real sound of reality is.
I have a question. I love what you just said, because I'm totally convinced everything is based on the holy name.
Can you hear it?
Can you hear it? Yeah. But my question is, I've always noticed that the so-called scientific theories are just a bunch of word jugglery. And if you try to make sense out of them, they don't really make sense. And I remember the Bhaktivedanta Institute mentioned that Darwin hated the peacock feather because it didn't make any sense for it. It was an eye that had no function. But my question is, do the pseudoscientists today ever question that there is no beginning? Is it considered scientific that everything has a beginning, middle, and an end?
Yeah, but they just study the middle. They don't see the beginning, and they don't understand the end. There was a beginning. There was a beginning. We're halfway through the universe. It's all based on the age of Lord Brahma. So there was a beginning, and there will be an end to this universe. But they study the middle. They just study what's in the middle, and they try to speculate how it all began. It's not possible. They can't even understand how it's going to end and how it's going through a cycle.
But I'm talking about the fact that all the material ingredients that they're saying spontaneously developed life, where did they come from? And actually, according to there isn't really everything, he is the beginning, the middle, and the end, but actually everything exists eternally except for karma. And it's like, so it's like you can say the origin of life as we know it may have been something, but where did the ingredients, where's their origin? So if you keep going back and back, it's endless. It's infinity.
Well, they don't go back. They don't go back and back. They stop.
Okay.
They stop with chemicals.
My question was, do they ever consider that? Or do they think that's just bogus religion?
No, they're prejudiced.
You see, there's a lack of intelligence here. The finer tissues of the brain have not been developed in these people.
Okay, no.
Because of all this meat eating. Shubham said meat destroys the finer tissues of the brain. Because of all this promiscuity, you see, because of all this immorality, because of all the falsity, all these things are steal intelligence. He says when a young boys and young girls mix prematurely, their intelligence is lost. So they haven't been building their intelligence their lifetimes. They've been losing their intelligence. So they can't understand because they have a poor fund of knowledge. because knowledge means you have to have intelligence to understand it, to understand what knowledge really is. They can't understand anything because their intelligence is too limited.
Rupanuga Prabhu and then Purnaprajna, we talk about, and I think you were hitting on something really, I think it's very important, sound vibration. And it's subtle, like you were saying. I said, was there a, last class I asked the question, is there instrumentation to measure, because we know the size of the Atma is described in, as being 10,000 part of the tip of the hair. You mentioned Armstrongs. How many was that, Prabhu?
I think Sariputta said there were three or four angstroms. Angstrom is a very special measurement.
Micron, which is like 1,000th part of a millimeter.
An angstrom is a unit of measurement equal to 1/10,000,000th of a millimeter, primarily used to express electromagnetic wavelengths. And what Sariputta did was he was able to measure this because he had electronic. First of all, he could see a tip of a hair by the naked eye. Then he took the tip of a hair and put it under an electron microscope. Because he was a mathematician, he had his PhD in mathematics. He was able to calculate from what he saw by dividing it up according to this, what an angstrom is, a unit equal to 1/10,000,000th of a millimeter. He figured the rest out by mathematics. And he came out with, I believe it was 3 or 4. So when Srila Prabhupada was walking with Swarup Damodar, when he was visiting in Washington back in '76, Swarup Damodar, and I heard this conversation, he said, Srila Prabhupada, Sariputta said that the spirit soul is I think, these are 4 or 8 angstroms in diameter or size. Srila Prabhupada said, the spirit soul has dimension. Because it said in the Shastra, 1/10,000th tip of a hair. So it has dimension. But it's spiritual dimension. So anyway, he didn't contradict what Sariputta said. He just answered by saying the spirit soul has dimension. So it can be measured. And Sariputta did it as closely as could be possible. But Sariputta was a genius.
Yes, yeah, definitely. Also proud of this. And then, we see that the sample of the rock thrown in the middle of the pond, it have as many rings, and it goes on until it hits the shore or a border. In Chaitanya Charitamrita, it speaks, there is a dialogue between Haridas Thakur and Lord Chaitanya.
Srila Prabhupada had much confidence in Sariputta, Madhava, and Swarup Damodar to act as a spearhead to puncture this great dream of Darwinism that permeates the planet. And that BI was started officially in 1976 in New Hastinapur, called Potomac now, when all of us got together and we met, and Srila Prabhupada outlined his task. Life Comes from Life was the book. There was going to be a quarterly journal coming out, and we discussed, and actually in a short time after that, various chapters were assigned to the members to write for that book, Life Comes from Life. So at that time, it was very clear that VI was a challenge to materialistic science, and that he was expecting his PhDs to defeat it. That was the whole thrust of the Bhaktivedanta Institute. And I think that we're obliged to Purnaprajna for actually doing something like that. He has written a book which is a challenge in that spirit, And he's not a PhD in science. And I just have a bachelor's degree in psychology. So it doesn't take a rocket scientist to challenge these dharmists.
It takes, Prabhu, I think, but it takes, like Prabhupada said, I want all my disciples to be not just like one field, but they'll be expert at everything, all just not theoretically, but in action. So they could be behind anything. Why? Because, like you said, finer brain tissue is developed by the process of the chanting. I mean, we see sound creates waves, moves air. So the some imagine what we can. I'm sure it can be proven too. For those who, like Prabhupada said, what is this? For those who challenge this chanting, okay, we got 60 volumes, like he was saying in Melbourne, in Australia, and others who understand that from chanting everything comes. That's all right, but we don't like blind faith.
No, chanting is a great experiment. Chanting is a great scientific experiment.
So I
You
used
challenge anything, just try it for yourself. It's a personal affair. It's personal science, perfection at home. Just chant and see what happens. It's a challenge. It's scientific hypothesis. Chant and you'll see. We can demonstrate it. It's very scientific.
Yeah.
It's the science of God, as Prabhupada said.
Right. And so that's what I always tell my cousins. I have doctors, very famous engineers, or like that. I mean, the drip irrigation, desalination of soils was my father's cousin, first cousin, my uncle. He gave this, he gave it to Israel as a gift. Also, he started drip irrigation, all kinds of things like that. So there are always challenges, and as I became more and more interested in Srila Prabhupada's writings from day one, when I had to translate, and I brought the books to my father, all these things were always there, all sentimentality and all that. I said, well, what I'm doing is something very scientific. I'm using myself. I experimented on myself. What will be the results of chanting this Hare Krishna mantra? Some are like what Prabhu here is discovering in the scientific world, that you definitely have open atheists who will never be, they have prejudice, against others in my family that start to think about it, but they live in a world that, having their degrees is something very important. They don't want to lose their jobs, etc. But also they want to be considered very intelligent and above the social.
Everything in your book, Prabhu, is Purva.
Right.
Anyway, everything in your book, we could be quoting his cousin, Daniel Nijensen, professor emeritus at Yale, voted the #1 or acclaimed the #1 brain surgeon in the world. And
in the late 70s.
And I mean, and he was hosting Einstein's property procurer, and he's like really prominent in the scientific and medical world.
Mostly medical.
But what they're saying in your book, a lot of word jugglery. He equates the brain to God, and if you try to defeat him scientifically or logically, he becomes angry.
We'll go head to head.
Yeah,
so,
but if I just bring it back to, this chanting, it works and it's based on love and affection, then okay, he likes that.
So we sat in
So he chants with us, but he still propounds this ridiculous philosophy that you're exposing.
If God exists, he's really cruel.
Oh, that's what his father said.
He said either it doesn't exist or he's very cruel. And so they don't understand, it just, when it gets to the free will, it's like the latest Schwab, he was talking about that every living entity in the planet now, every human can be hacked, and that we're able now to do what maybe before, this no longer be a free will entity, or the soul as a free will. So they are dogmatic. They are very dogmatic, very much, entrenched,
prejudice,
and entrenched in this thoughts. But they obviously are coming from not only just pure final knowledge, like Rupanuga Prabhu was saying, and also these missions that they're very attached to. They make money. But basically, it's that Marx would say that religion is the opium of the opiate of the masses. I think that actually sense enjoyment is the opiate of the masses. As long as people could go home and drink their beer and have a roof over their heads, then they won't question all this other stuff.
Stoka Krishna Prabhu, excuse me, Stoka Krishna Prabhu, you didn't have a chance to read tonight or ask a question. Do you have anything to say to Rupanuga and Purnaprajna Prabhu? Stoka Krishna.
I just would like to say thank you. It's a very enlightening discussion, and it gives us a great understanding of just how ridiculous the claims of the Darwinian scientists are, because while they use word jugglery basically by presenting these theories as if they were credible, but if you really look into how probable their claims are, they just turn out to be completely improbable and impossible. So thank you very much, and I'm very enjoying I'm listening to all your contributions, and I'm imbibing the spirit of preaching that you all embody. So thank you.
I needed to make a correction. My uncle's name was Leonard Greenbaum, and he was a mathematician. He was my great uncle, and he was the head of the mathematical department at Stevens College in St. Louis, Missouri.
And he was a colleague of Einstein.
He and Einstein worked on a project together, a stealth bomber, for 12 years. 12 years.
Prabhupada criticized the scientists, saying the only thing they can do is destroy life. They cannot create life. They know how to accelerate death.
My cousin's Oppenheimer, who created the atom bomb.
Your cousin.
my claim to misreputation.
At least he quoted the Bhagavad Gita. Time I am.
Yeah.
That they got straight. That part they got straight. They say it all happened over a long period of time. You see, they don't know they're talking about Krishna.
Right.
Ah.
Right. That's right. They're talking. The whole thing is based on Krishna.
And the other little thing in talking to Nemi Maharaj, who's a god brother and a friend, dear friend, I was
Janadas.
Yes, about. I said, well, what's going on with you? Well, he's been preaching in Russia. He's done extensive preaching all over the Eastern Bloc. But he got enthusiastic, and it was like about to form, because I thought Prabhupada challenged us that there should be a department of Vedic science in college. It begins with the knowledge of who we are. That's not there. And but now they're saying that, what is it, fifth generation computers, fifth or sixth generation computers that will be talking to each other in Sanskrit. It's the most precise language on the planet. You can measurements, for example, you have micro measurements that we can even of time that we don't even conceive of that, or micro measurements of time, like they have a name for the 1/40th of a second. They said that when Krishna wants to move in the rasa dance, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says that he moves so fast that it looks like in several places. Then the acharyas differ. Srila Prabhupada says Krishna expands. But in any way, it's measure, there's a word for that speed that God runs from one place to the other, and it's 1/40th of a second. So how scientific Vedic culture is, this Vedic science is that we try in one part of it, what people call metaphysics, but there is all the rest of the stuff that can be explained. But it'll be really interesting in the future, since you were saying that in the future we'll have judges with the tilak on. I was just hoping that in the future will be like departments in college that will teach real knowledge, not sound biased stuff.
Thank you, Hari Prabhu. Rupanuga Prabhu or Purnaprajna Prabhu, before we call it a night, any final words from you before we go?
I was thinking about, and Purnaprajna and I have discussed this before, they're not aware of the subtle laws of nature. They study gross energy. Even the subtle energy, which is also material energy, is not very well known to them. For example, the human brain, the human mind stores the same subtle body has gone through all the different changes of evolutionary bodies, right? And it stores experiences from all the previous lives in this. We have it with us right now. I mean, there's no computer that can store so much information. And this one brain of one human being has a record. So sometimes, Srila Prabhupada explains, like in the forest, you'll see in the pool, sometimes some bubbles come up. You see bubbles coming up to the surface, a little pool. But sometimes from the subconscious, bubbles come up to consciousness. And we remember parts of past lives. And if people become overwhelmed, they can go insane because their past memories don't match with their present life. So buried in the subconscious are all these memories. They're all recorded. It's just like it's all audio, video, just like this. And for every second. Now, where can they ever create such a machine that could store so much? How many chips would it take? It's impossible. It's impossible. They don't even understand the subtleties of the mind because they don't know we've had the same mind, the same subtle body with us since the beginning of our coming in this material world. The same subtle body. It does not change when the gross body changes. That is beyond their wildest imagination. But they're simply caught up on the gross material platform. Even electricity, that's not subtle energy. Right. Even radio waves, that's not subtle energy. That's still gross energy. So whatever they're studying is on that level.
Experiences of every species, right? Every different species, and how different the consciousness is of, say, an insect to a human consciousness they have experienced. How is that experience to be?
You see, we forget all of that. But what we do carry forward is the impression. Right. There's an impression that when we get to the human form of life, we've got the impression from all these previous lives, although we don't remember. The impression is this place is not fit to remain here. We get the idea that we can't be happy here. We get the idea that we have to die and we have to find out the purpose of life before that. We begin to wake up to this. And that's human life. When it's like Tattva Brahmacharya stuff. Now's the time to ask, what's the purpose of life? And a human being who doesn't is on the eating, sleeping, mating, and defending platform. It's like the animals. So these people are being trained to be animals instead of human beings. The human being consciousness is intended to evolve to Krishna consciousness.
So they start from the gross to the subtle because they're so immersed into their gross conception, isn't it?
Yes.
Like that verse, Brahmeti Paramameti Bhagavaniti Shabdyate. It's all an undifferentiated substance, but according to the point of view of that particular individual who see as God as Brahma, the all-pervading phenomenon, or localized Brahma, or Bhagavan outside the body, but it's all one and different at the same time. So, but it's according to the point of observation. So scientists are beginning from the fallacy that they're thinking that their bodies, so they're starting explaining that hardware comes first and then the subtle part. The Vedic version is different, like you were saying, from sound, and it gets thicker or grosser and grosser till the element of earth, which contains all the rest of them. So it always fascinated me. I have a background in science, but I left all that behind to join Srila Prabhupada, because I realized that there was something a lot higher than.
We've been saved by the sound of truth coming from Srila Prabhupada. And our obligation to him, our reciprocation with him, is to simply share the sound of truth with other conditioned souls. That is the main duty of the disciple, to share what he's learned from Srila Prabhupada. However we do it. And Purnaprajna is doing it in that way. There are other ways. Each of us have a way.
Your book is so wonderful.
Thanks.
It's so like the newest and strongest preaching life beyond Darwin.
I'll send one of those to my cousin. Apart from reading. We were in Mexico City and Prabhupada announced the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. And everybody said, when it was roaring, by all the front lines, there were all the book distributors and all that. And Prabhupada, let him die down and said, aren't you going to read it?
They were all saying they were going to sell so many of them.
Yeah, we promise Prabhupada will sell all of them. We'll sell thousands. Very good, very good. So aren't you going to read it? He looked at the whole room and said, now with your age, he said, you can read my books at least 3 times.
Stoka Krishna Prabhu just announced he bought the book a few minutes ago on Kindle. Another one sold. I don't want to keep Purnaprajna Prabhu up too late, or Rupanuga, because we need to take care of them so that they can come back on Wednesday. I'm especially grateful to Rupanuga for coming and supporting our reading and adding so much more in-depth nectar. And I hope you'll come back again on Wednesday, and everyone else, please come back Wednesday evening, same time. Is that all right?
Haribo.
Yes, Haribo. Hare Krishna.
Please accept my respectful obeisances. See you on Wednesday, Krishna willing. Vancha
glories.
Kalpat.
Glories to you, Prabhupada.
Cha Patitanang Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Jai.
Hari Hari Bo.
Hari Krishna.
Bhaktivedanta Institute ki jai.
Jai.
Darwin ki jai.
Jai.
Please invite your friends to the next session. Give them the link. Let's increase the numbers.
Well, can we get that book in Amazon, or how do we?
Hard copy.
Hard copy.
You can get it on Amazon and as a Kindle electronic book, or as a paper book as well. And the publisher sells it as well. I think the one that published the book, I forget what it was called, but I found it through Google.
You'll find this video at my YouTube site. My YouTube site is Gaura Das, Gaura, and then separate word Das. And all the previous sessions, because we've been doing this group for over a year now. It started a little bit before Gaura Purnima the previous year, and Bhavatrini and Rahari, they've been hardcore attendees, as well as Nanda Patni and Nitya Leela comes often. So always happy to have more devotees coming that we can hear and chant with. I'm doing this basically for myself because I'm an hour and a half away from the closest devotee. So I'm desperate for your association, everybody here. So I pray that you'll come back. Because it's not fun just being on my own all the time. I'm not so advanced that I realize that Krishna is here with me all the time and Prabhupada is always present all the time. I know that in theory, but I still need other, parts and parcels of Krishna in forms to interact with. And this is only a screen, but it's better than nothing.
You shouldn't complain. You're at Radha Kund.
Thank you for reminding me.
You haven't.
That's all a show. But thank you for reminding me. That's where I want to be. but I'm not even really qualified to be there either.
Right on this platform. Thank you so much for being
Yeah. Yeah, that was ecstatic. Wow. I mean, Rupanuga hasn't gone on a video in like decades.
Really?
Yeah, really. I don't even think he gives class in Alachua. Like we're getting classes from him that he doesn't. You have to go into his living room to be able to get these classes. So so we're entering into Rupanuga Prabhu's living room.
I know you work at it. That's great.
So yeah, please help me and spread the link that I gave you and try to bring others. I mean, it was a nice number tonight. Actually, everybody had a chance to read except Stoka Krishna, but he also had a job that he was simultaneously doing. And you know, you're not obliged to have to go on the camera, but it makes it more personal than to be speaking from a black box with your name on it. No one is obliged to have to come on the camera, but it makes it personal because we are not just black boxes, even though modern science would like us to believe that we came from a black box.
Yeah, we're not absolute. The name and the form is the same. No. Our names have different.
So is it earlier or later now? With
It's
your
later
time
for them.
change?
Oh, this earlier.
It's 10 to 10 here for us. What did we go, Prairie? Did we go back or forward in daylight savings time? I think we went
We
forward.
went forward.
Yeah, right.
Okay. So now it's later, but you feel like it's early.
Yeah, it's actually 11 o'clock for us, but it's 10 according to our clock.
Yeah, your biological clock. That's right.
So Via, see if you can get any devotees in the Ottawa area to please come.
Yeah, I'm gonna share the link for sure for both. Yeah.
Okay. And Prairie, if you could spread the word. You're the only devotee from all of Montreal that attended. So you have a few million invitations to send out.
I shall do that. Yes.
Thank you very much. Okay, super. And Nichilila, thank you for coming all the way from Pakistan. Even if you only caught the end part, it's all recorded on YouTube for posterity's sake.
Your books
Please
are,
accept my
Johnny, I was going to say your books have left California and gotten to New York.
But then it's a message that they're going back and forth.
What were you saying, Nichilila? Sorry.
Yeah, please accept my humble obeisances. I really appreciate the last part. That was regarding scientific connection and consciousness and how we perceive things, incarnation, and the imprints in our mind since many years. It's really wonderful, and would like to learn more in future sessions as well.
Yes, you have a lot of doctors and scientists that you could be sharing since you're a medical doctor yourself, right?
Yeah, exactly. It would be great help to understand and then propagate the message. Yeah.
We need to have Bhaktivedanta Institute symposiums in Pakistan, I think.
Not yet. We
Oh,
didn't have any.
I'm saying that Srila Prabhupada would be very pleased if we could organize.
Oh yeah, wonderful. Thank you very much for wishing best for us all the time.
There's another project for you for Pakistan Yatra, Bhaktivedanta Institute discussions.
Yeah, I went through all the conversations going on, but because of traveling these days, I'm pretty stuck in so many tasks, so could not get back to you. I'm very sorry.
No, that's quite fine. But let's make this another project to work on how we can reach out to the scientists of Islam, the scientists there of Pakistan, and share these views with them.
Oh yeah, why not? It's really wonderful, but have to go with meticulous approach because direct preaching is not allowed here.
Mm-hmm. Well, at least
Yeah.
we can confirm the existence of Allah.
Yeah, there are ways, and I am learning all of you actually how to make such possibility happen. Yeah.
Yes, so this requires more discussion. So I hope you can make
Exactly.
it. Yeah, I hope your job will allow you to make it a little earlier. This in 2 days from now.
Exactly.
Nitya,
Thank you very much. Yeah.
but Nitya, one thing is our spiritual, Srila Prabhupada, our Gurudev, would always say this, everything will be answered through your practice of Krishna's devotional service.
Mhm.
Sri Narayana Maharaj, they go hand in hand. We need to, of course, we need to read and understand it, but the true understanding will come actually when we practice this bhakti yoga devotion, pure devotional service.
I would say though that I think a vast majority of devotees, I mean, I'm making kind of a grand statement right now, but I don't think many of us are trained in how to do scientific preaching. I'm not sure exactly how astute so many of us are to present challenging statements about Darwinism to the average person and to be what's the expression, to think on our feet and be really sharp, to know how to, because there's going to be arguments coming back at us. And this was actually the comment I wanted to bring to Purnaprajna. I'll do it next time, that we need to have, I don't know, my thought was, a kind of a script. What are our main points, and what are the main points that the atheists, the Darwinists, the neo-Darwinists will throw back at us, and how to counter that. I think that's important.
I second you. Yeah, sorry. Please go on.
No, I was just thinking of one of the things my cousin would say is just that, which I heard many times in preaching, is that, it's a mechanism of the mind to create God because of the angst or the anxiety of living. We have to come up with something that, there will be transcendent and it will give us, the hope of
some comfort.
And so Rupanuga will be perfect for that.
Yeah.
But like I said, if we don't, preaching means like going to there. So we need ammunition. And it's right. Beside that, of course, his book is very amazing, a great contribution. But when you have 5-10 minutes to capture somebody, we have to be really knowledgeable. If we go to challenge that world, have our ammunition ready. But nevertheless, what was interesting at my cousin's meeting, he invited us to this conference, and it was pretty much those professors were on the atheistic side, but they have a team with them. And when we start talking about, because like Gaura said, observing Srila Prabhupada, you have to find the common ground. If you come from some lofty or some different, you have to find the common ground. And so in the case of my uncle, he liked languages and food. So Bhatrini thought, okay, if we go confront them in a scientific way about this is Vedic knowledge, or we're not the body, we're the soul. There'll be challenges, it'll be uncomfortable, But no, we just befriended them, and Bhatrini made a bunch of sweet balls. And and I got him super. He said, okay, come tomorrow. It's a private, meeting. I want you to come. And I brought him a Bhagavad Gita, and I felt really embarrassed because he expected me to be expert in Sanskrit. He said, "You studying this and you don't know Sanskrit?" Yeah, I know some, but and then I realized, oh my God, yeah, really. So being prepared, we need to really study Prabhupada's books and then have this type of stavoshtis when things are broken down, analyzed, and pass on to all devotees. So you're right. I mean, we need, that ammunition.
I was hearing from Bhakti Swarup Damodar Maharaj. He was speaking to Prabhupada because he had just organized the, what was it called? Synthesis of Science and Religion Symposium in Mumbai.
Yeah.
And Bhakti Swarup Damodar Maharaj said, even though these scientists were debating and, not necessarily on the same page, he said, when it came to the very wonderful prasadam, probably a paneer sabjis and gulab jamins and all of that, he was saying they all loved that and they all were won over by the prasadam, and Prabhupada said, yes, they come for the tongue. So that's still our secret weapon. I mean, we can argue and debate, but we should never underestimate the potency of Krishna Prasad.
No, and now we're a culture, we're not just one thing. Yes, a scientific approach, to any metaphysics or understanding of who we are, like that, creation, or origin, let's say, origin, like that. But we are a culture, but the very culture is what Prabhupada presented to us. It's Krishna culture. That's all attractive.
Sorry.
Yeah, no,
I just wanted to say to Prairie, Via, Stoka Krishna, Nichalila, and I don't know who else is still here. Ananda is still here. Anand Dev. That I'm not bragging here. I'm just stating something that I did as a service back in the 80s, and it's something that you could consider doing. And that was I would go to the University of Toronto. I went to York University in Toronto, and McMaster University in Hamilton, and I just went with a clipboard. And well, first of all, I went to the office. I went to the student center, and I asked them, what are the prerequisites to start a club on campus? And I looked younger then, so I just kind of blended in with the student population. And they said, oh, well, different campuses would say, okay, you need a president, a vice president, a treasurer, or, you need a president and you need 10 members, 10 people wanting a club. But it was pretty much all the same. So then I go with my clipboard and I'd stop the students on the street and say, excuse me, we're thinking of starting a club on campus, and we're going to be like, do you like the cafeteria food, or do you think it'd be nice to have like maybe once a week a home cooked vegetarian dinner on campus? And like all the students say, yeah, that sounds really good. I said, great. Would you mind just signing up here? We just need a few signatures so we can get our club started. And at one point I even said to a student, excuse me, and I explained the same thing, the same pitch. And I said, we're just missing a president. I understand you're probably really busy, but this is just some red tape we have to go through. Would you mind signing up as the president? Yeah, okay, I can be the president. And then once I got to 10 signatures, I handed it into the office, and they'd say, okay, come back in 1 week and we'll ratify your club for you. Then once I got club status, they didn't even know I was a Krishna devotee and that I wasn't even a student. And then, but I had all the prerequisites, and then they granted me the use of faculty lounges where I would set up my little hot plate and I'd show them how to roll a chapati, because I did a cooking course, a 10-week or 7-week course, whatever it was, cooking in consciousness it was called. I learned it from a godbrother, Stamba Prabhu, and each week you do a different preparation. Chapatis the first week, rice or dal the next week, and different topics. Exploding the protein myth the first week. The second week was vegetarianism and economics, then vegetarianism and environmentalism, then vegetarianism and ethics, what the great philosophers, Tolstoy, Einstein, great thinkers said about it, and then vegetarianism and Judaism, Islam, and then finally the last class was vegetarianism and Vedic culture. And I would try to bring a feast with me from the temple. The devotees got angry at me because I would hide all the burfis and samosas to bring to my students, and they were looking for the burfis, and I would hide them so I could give them to my bhaktas and potential bhaktas and bhaktins at the university. Anyway, the next level that I went to was that each university campus offered, like, at least in those days, I don't know if they do it anymore, but they offered each club like $200 or $300, whatever it was, for the whole year. And so then I gathered that money up together from the 3 campuses, and then I paid a ticket for Sadaputa Prabhu, the genius that Rupanuga Prabhu actually made into a devotee. And that was a question I wanted to actually ask him about how he made Sadaputa Prabhu a devotee. Dr. Richard Thompson. I would call him the Einstein of ISKCON. And so then I flew in Sadaputa Prabhu, picked him up at the airport. I asked him to bring or ship ahead a box of his book, Mechanistic and Non-Mechanistic Science. And then while all this was going on, I contacted every physics professor, every biology professor, every chemistry professor, inviting them. And I got this huge lecture halls in each of the campuses for free. They probably would have cost like $1,000, or I don't know how much they charge to rent a lecture hall. But because I started these campuses, the campus clubs, I called them the Vedic Cultural Society of University of Toronto, the York University Vegetarian Club, the McMaster University Vegetarian Cooking Club. And yeah, so using that funding, I brought in Sadaputa, and then I filled up. I didn't exactly fill up, but I got probably, at each campus, probably 100 professors or something like that to come. And all his books got sold. But my failing was that I didn't do a follow-up on all that. After all that effort and energy, um, I can't remember whether I had them sign a book or like how to get back in touch with them. And yeah, I wasn't confident that I had enough scientific education to know how to bring them to the next level. But hindsight's 2020. I'm reflecting right now. I probably should have just followed in Bavatarini's footsteps and brought them sweet balls or something, just kept up a friendship or something.
Yeah, well, it's the doctor. I mean, that world is like approaching world of very rich people.
Yes.
You don't go to ask them, you give them.
Yes.
And don't owe and reverence them, and then you'll be surprised. I mean, there's hints in it, but that is not over. I mean, it started a program that it could be mimicked, I think, by the younger generation.
Yeah, that's
to
a great
contact.
idea.
It's a great
Gaura.
idea. It's wonderful.
Yeah.
I mean, I did help.
So Krishna's nodding his head.
Yeah, I helped Ravatinanan Swami. Remember, later was a good friend.
Preacher. Yeah.
A great preacher. I mean, very smart. And so he had friends in UCLA and maybe UCSD, but we went to UCLA. That's the thing. And he used to get rooms where we explain everything from, like you were saying, from food and breaking down the diet of the devotee to chanting, how is the effects of chanting, scientific ways. It was very incredible. But the clincher was that he was such a good cook, and so he showed me how to make the best halava I ever had. And those are, if you didn't get in with an intellectual thing, because some people, they will lend 5 minutes of their time and then they forget. So it has to be followed up by either a book or the book and prasadam. So yeah, your program is, I think, great. Keep encouraging.
So Drita Karma Prabhu is out there. He's doing Bhaktivedanta Institute preaching. Gyanadas Nimi Maharaj, he's in England. He's doing that preaching there. I'm just saying, I'm just a little guy. I'm not a scholar. I'm not an intellectual. But when I read Prabhupada's statement that there is no higher preaching than preaching to the scientists because they are the most influential people in society, I thought, wow, Prabhupada really values this. I should be trying to do this for Prabhupada because he really likes this. This is important to him. And so Krishna helped me. Krishna opened many doors for me, Nirhari.
Yeah, no, how he's announced by Thakur that he'll send. Actually, it's in the it's a Purana or like that. I found a quote by God brother. I think it was Mukanda. Anyhow, about Prabhupada was the general that Krishna will send. Yeah? And so as such, he was a best strategist. And so he knew what the society was gearing towards. And master at picking up titles at Easy Journey to Other Planets. That just grabbed me when I was a student. I was just like, what? Yeah, I mean, what an amazing concept and how he brings it. So we gotta, follow in the footsteps.
So that wasn't the end of that. What happened is I didn't realize this at the time, but the University of Toronto and York University had tens of thousands of Jewish students. And so I think maybe I went a little bit over the parameters. Like there's a saying that you should know your boundaries. And so I was able to set up a book table in what was called the Sydney Smith student SAC, Student Activity Center, like, yeah, where the main place where all the students gather. And I set up a book table there, and most of the students that were coming were Jewish kids, and they'd look at my table. And I devised a preaching strategy, but it kind of backfired on me because I said to them, "Have you, you from a Jew? You're from a Jewish family, aren't they?" And they'd say, "Yeah, I'm Jew." And I'd say, "Okay, cool, that's great. You've probably heard how the Jewish people are the chosen people of God." And they say, "Yeah, yeah, we of course it's in our scriptures." And I say, "Oh, fantastic. Okay, so in this ancient Vedic culture, it talks about the Yadu dynasty, which is sometimes pronounced with a J. Yadu becomes Jadu, and Jadu is like very close to Judah. And so actually, the chosen people of God are known as the Jadu dynasty or the Judah dynasty, and Krishna is the head of the Jadu dynasty. And if you chant this mantra, mantra, Hare Krishna, you'll become a better Jew. It'll help you to become a better Jew and more connected with the Jadu dynasty. So some of the students went back to the head rabbi of the university, Rabbi Moishe Silverman, and they're saying, "Yeah, we met this guy, Gaura Das. He's telling us we'll become better Jews if we chant Hare Krishna." And the head rabbi, he declared war against me. He wrote an article in the Varsity newspaper, a newspaper that went out to 50,000 students. And the rabbi wrote, "If you meet a young man on campus, and he's really friendly, and he seems to have an answer to all your questions, and he invites you to a free vegetarian dinner, beware. You've met a dangerous member of the Hare Krishna movement who has mind control techniques, and he can brainwash you." And that Judaism has a very high standard of spirituality, and most Jewish kids don't make the grade. So there's these dangerous cults waiting in the ring, in the wings, to prey on the Jewish kids. So beware. So I went to the campus newspaper when I saw, because I noticed after the rabbi wrote that, then when I would approach kids on campus, I could see some of them were like, "Oh, you're the guy that we were warned about," and people were like a little less friendly to me. So I went to the student newspaper, to the editor, and I said, "The rabbi wrote these things about me, and I have a son, and maybe one day he may be walking down the hallways of the University of Toronto, and I don't want people to look at him as if he's brainwashed and a cult member or something." I said, may I write a retaliation, a rebuttal to the rabbi? And they said, "Well, okay, but we're not taking sides here." And I brought them some pakoras that I made with tamarind chutney, and they really liked the pakoras. So the article I wrote was, "When the persecuted become the persecutors." And I started out with, "We've all heard about the Holocaust and how horrible that is. And, we feel so much sympathy for the Jewish people and other, people that the Nazis rounded up." But I said, "Isn't it the greatest irony when those who have been persecuted start to persecute others because they are of a different spiritual persuasion?" And then I mentioned something about Vedic culture going back millions of years and, the greatness of it. And so then the rabbi very quickly organized Cult Awareness Week. And he invited a former like I say former godbrother, because he actually was paid by the rabbi to come and speak against the Hare Krishna movement. His name was Jagannath Sutta Das, and he used to be with one of the people on the Back to Godhead magazine. And he came in a suit, and I went in disguised myself, looking like a karmi, and in plain clothes. And so he was in a little lecture hall, and he said, "Yeah, I used to be a Hare Krishna, and they used to send me out on Sankirtan. Sankirtan's the way that they raised their money." And he said, "But I just wanted to study Sanskrit, But the temple president told me, no, no, you have to go on Sankirtan. And so they force you to go on book distribution. But I really just wanted to study Sanskrit. I don't remember the rest of what he said, but it was really weird to see like a godbrother of mine speaking against Prabhupada's mission. So the rabbi had a table set out in the hallway. I had not gone to meet him yet. And I was just in plain clothes. And I said, do you have any information on the Hare Krishna movement? And he handed me an article from Rolling Stone magazine entitled Dial Om for Murder. And it was about some devotee who murdered another devotee because he was having an affair with his wife. And Rolling Stone magazine made like a huge thing out of it. And I said, yeah, do you have something on Hare Krishna? He said, yeah, here. And he handed me like an article about murder within the Hare Krishna movement. It's like he was very envious. So what I did, I mean, I was really fired up at the time, and I need to be doing that again. Otherwise, I just end up getting permanently banned from Facebook for attacking Bill Gates and Anthony Fauci. Anyway, I ordered a set of Prabhupada's books from Israel in the Nectar of Devotion, Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, First Canto, and Krishna book, and I brought these books to the rabbi. And there he was in his black hat and black beard and what do they call it? The pesa? The little black curly pieces hanging from the side of his head. And I, oh, okay, thank you. And then I went into his office and I said, Rabbi, I'd like to present these to you for your consideration. And I'll come back in a week or two. I'd just like to hear your thoughts. And when I came back, he said to me, Gaura Das, if people want to become Hare Krishna, I send them to you. But if they want to be Jew, then you send them to me. You cannot become a better Jew by becoming Hare Krishna, because a Jewish festival is not complete without liquor, wine, and kosher meat. You understand? And I thought, wow, here I am like facing a rabbi. And I said, because I'd seen this movie made by Jonathan Kay. It was called The Vegetarian World with William Shatner, who's originally from Toronto, as the narrator. And in Vegetarian World, William Shatner of Star Trek fame, he quotes, he has in the movie the head rabbi of Haifa, which I think is a city in Israel, Haifa. And he's talking about vegetarianism within the Jewish tradition. And you know how Adam and Eve were originally vegetarians in the Garden of Eden. So I started presenting that to the rabbi, but I was feeling kind of nervous because I'm challenging the rabbi, who he's supposed to be the guru, you know, of that culture. So it didn't quite end there. I'm almost done my story. So I went to the Canadian Human Rights Commission and I contacted the ombudsman. And I complained to him that this rabbi is attacking me on campus. I'm just trying to share the message of the Vedas, Vedic culture, or what's called Hinduism. And this rabbi is giving me a really hard time. And he's you know, denigrating me, et cetera, and the tradition I represent. So then the ombudsman called a meeting with me and the rabbi. And my godbrother, Bhakti Marg Swami, who was president of the temple, he wanted other groups to join. And I didn't want to do that because the other groups that Maharaj wanted was the Scientologists, who are a cult. I'm not sure if it was the Children of God, the Unification Church, Reverend Sung Myung Moon. And, you know, just like in the New York Times, when Prabhupada, when an article was written about him, it wasn't just about him, it was called The Year of the Guru. And it showed Prabhupada with such a Sly Baba and Maharishi Mahesh Bogi and, you know, all these impersonalists. And Prabhupada was mixed in with all these Bogi yogis. And Prabhupada said, no, I don't like this, that you're mixing me in. But anyway, because Maharaj is my older godbrother, acquiesced to his idea that we should, you know, bring in all these other bogus groups so that we'll have more numbers to fight against the rabbi, and I went to the Jewish part of Toronto and I bought a bottle of Manischewitz, which is Urmila Devi Dasi's parents. I bought a bottle of Manischewitz kosher grape juice, and I served out a little glass of kosher grape juice to everyone in the room. And wouldn't you know it, the only person who wouldn't drink it was the rabbi. he, he was so like antisocial. And basically the ombudsman told him, you cannot denigrate any group. But he said what you can do is you can call out people for their deviant activities. If they do activities which are not spiritual, that you can do, but you can't attack other religions. So then the rabbi changed the name of Cult Awareness Week to Pulling Your Own Strings Week, which is a name of Dr. Wayne Dyer's book, Pulling Your Own Strings. The problem is the rabbi wanted to pull our strings, and he didn't like it that I was having some influence over his Jewish students. And finally, the end of the story is that some weeks later, I saw for the first time the Jewish Student Union advertised free vegetarian cooking classes for Jewish students. So that's my little story of campus preaching, which also involved Bhaktivedanta Institute. And I remember at that time, I was really in the fire because I never had so much pushback against any effort I'd made to preach. And in the Adi Leela, I think it's number 7, a chapter, it describes that when the Chandkazi and the Smarta Brahmins were, fighting against the Sankirtan movement, Prabhupada said, when we get resistance, that's a sign that we're actually having effect. So if I'm not feeling any resistance in my life, in my attempt to try to preach Krishna consciousness, that means maybe I'm not making the effort that I should make. I'm not saying that we should always preach to get persecuted, but that's just a little insight I have. So I thank you for letting me share that with you.
Yeah.
That was an amazing story.
Yeah, I remember you told us about the their reaction and campus.
But the thing is, I should have a life like that every day. Well, I don't know. I was obsessed with dealing with the rabbi. But I was absorbed in preaching, for sure I was. And the more I was being challenged, the more I challenged back. I didn't take a back seat. I felt like Arjuna on the battlefield. I felt like I was living Bhagavad Gita.
Yeah, the wonderful. Yeah, that was what I remember the old days. We weren't wearing wigs or anything like that, and we will go out right from the door of the temple, start walking and towards downtown in Buenos Aires, a big city. But yeah. Every day, if you want to put it as a challenge, you have highly educated people. I mean, they have universities there since the 1500s, and nothing compared to Pakistan or actually to India and the old universities, the old schools. But so yeah, all these challenges will be there. But what I noticed that how much we surrendered to Prabhupada, more it was a lot easier. It's as if words were put in our mouths. It kind of remind me, we were all like in awe, thinking, wow, this is like biblical times. Because when Jesus sends his disciples to talk, to preach, to give to us, what are we going to say? He said, don't worry, the Spirit will come, which is Paramatma. We know what that is. And there is no difference between the spiritual master and Paramatma. Is the outer manifestation of Super Soul. So I tell you, it was just like all we needed to do really was to surrender to the situation, be there. Is that bring our bodies to with sincerity that we knew. We all looked at each other and said, "Wow, did you say that?" I mean,
and Krishna uses us. What is it? Nimitta Savya Sachin. Nimitta Bhava Savya Sachin. Arjuna, you become my instrument.
Yes.
Does anyone else have any comments before I said I was going to cut off an hour ago?
I was just gonna say, Prabhu,
Yeah, yes.
because the Ottawa ISKCON is right beside Ottawa U. We do have a program every Wednesday. We do kirtan, and then we have Mangal Arati the next day. So we stay in the ashrams, the apartments right beside the temple, and it's such a good program. We have like Lakshmi Mani Mataji there. Sometimes she like gives like mini lectures, and it's so purifying. You see, especially in like a university atmosphere with everything that just went on the last 2 years, and since like like Rockefeller took over the education system, since all this corruption happened, like just seeing the students walk by when we're chanting, everyone's so attracted, and it naturally Krishna means all attractive. And I've seen it too with like prasad distribution, which we do that too. And then we have like a table for books. Even people that aren't like, that have no spiritual or like very little spiritual inclination, just eating the prasad, like it's so purifying. It like awakens this like seed of bhakti that's naturally in all beings. And I've seen it, like random people coming in, they want to start doing service. And I think Mandala Prabhu at Ottawa Temple, he did like a Sunday feast on the power of prasad and like sound vibration, how when we have like bhajans playing in the kitchen when we're cooking, or like we're chanting to the food, when we speak to the food and we give it life, it like affects it. I think it restructures the molecular structure of the food depending on what you say, and it literally does change the molecular structure of the food. So imagine what that's doing to even people that have no inclination, like they're eating it, it's purifying them. They come back and they want more. It's like, it's magic. I've seen it. It's crazy.
I'm really enlivened to hear that because we moved from Gloucester on Seville Road to that temple where you're currently at in the 80s,
Yeah.
late 70s, early 80s. And I became a chaplain at the University of Ottawa there. That was where I went to meet the Dean of Religious Studies. And he said, yes, religion is it's a necessary crutch for people to have in order to go through the difficulties of life. And I was shocked because I thought, as the Dean of Religious Studies, he'd be one of the most spiritual people, but he turned out to be an atheist. But I also started doing things at Carleton University there in Ottawa, and I met students who were running a radio show, and I got Lokanath Swami to come on that radio show and to speak to the students. And I also started a vegetarian cooking club at Carleton University. I found them to be quite receptive, and also it was all English. University of Ottawa used to be more French, I think. So yeah, there's no limit to how much you can expand, and I'm really happy to hear that you're doing outreach, and
Yeah.
a devotee can get chaplaincy and become a chaplain on the campus.
And we're gonna do it so much more, Prabhu, because on the 20th we're starting a brahmachari ashram program. So it's gonna be, I know that I'm gonna be one of the devotees. I think some other devotees, maybe, I don't know whether the ones in Montreal want to come, but everyone's welcome. It's like we're gonna have devotees actually living in the temple. So we're gonna have like Harinam every day. We're gonna have a full program. So
Great.
the outreach can be every day.
Fantastic.
Full absorption. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Can't imagine how much Gainesville, do you remember, Gaura, how many millions of plates they have served?
Oh my God. I served there for 6 months at the Krishna House. They were serving between 400 to 500 plates of prasadam. There was like a long lineup of students waiting every day. And it was 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, every day. And Daru Brahma would start cooking like 8 o'clock the night before, making a huge tomato sauce, and it would cook all night long. And then you'd wake up in Mangalarti to take the heat off, and cornbread, and I think one day was spaghetti. I mean, something different every day. And the students were just, I mean, they loved us. And we've met these people years later, where they've supported devotees because we kept them alive. We fed them through the university years. So that's another program via, sometimes. Yeah, there's a problem because sometimes cafeterias don't like us to give them competition, you know. So I don't know how that can get worked out.
Through the years, we met actually the man that is helping us with the cows. We're in a neighborhood, but we we just challenged the law because they give us Ag 1. Ag 1 in American is agricultural, 1 acre is agricultural. So instead of having dogs that are neighbors and other, we have 2 cows. And one of them is, they call it Lakshmi cow. She started giving us milk
Without a calf.
without a calf.
Wow.
And Kevin, he lived in New York. He worked for like
United Press.
United Press. I mean, like really big.
He went to University of Gainesville.
Yeah,
And
and he said, I survived on Prashad. You know, this is
He's taking care of your cows there in Hawaii.
Yeah, he helped
at
me
our
with the cows.
house, the 2 cows at our house.
And he's a graduate of the Prasadam program at the University of Florida in Gainesville.
And so many like that. So, oh my God, you're a Hare Krishna. You know, I was a student in Gainesville. You know, I survived on that food.
And I
All the
said,
years as a student.
I was sending the message to you, Leela, but it wouldn't work. This is about the Bhagavad Gitas that we mailed on January 24th. First, they stayed in our town on one island. They went to the next island, stayed there a little while. Then they went to California. They went to 3 different places, Los Angeles. And then they went to another town in California and sat there. And then they went back to Los Angeles. And on Saturday in Jamaica, New York. And we have a case open. So we said, why aren't you shipping them to Pakistan? And they said, we can't find a plane to take them. So anyway, now they're saying that
On the 17th will be the 35th day, so we can continue the case.
So anyway,
already open.
they think that
Sorry
they're going
about
to
that.
leave from Jamaica, New York and fly over to. But if they aren't gone by the 17th, then we'll speak to them again.
Thank you for helping Nichilila in Pakistan. Prabhupada said anyone who does the preaching in Pakistan or in the Muslim countries, he takes the dust from their feet. So Prabhupada must be taking the dust from both of your feet and that of Nichilila. So I hope you don't mind Prabhupada doing that. Nichilila?
Very courageous person.
Krishna. May I have some question actually came into just in my mind. I mean, I was going through yesterday about the quote that was signifying that the attachment of a person leads second life as per affection or kind of what we say, the thinking we have at the time of death, right? If a male has a kind of more attachment with female, then he would be taking a incarnation of female, right? I was just thinking that how the saintly people came to this world. Are they being attached somewhere and then they get body of male saint or female saint? How it goes?
Oh, for a saint? Oh, that's beyond the karma, and that's beyond.
Yeah, the 3 modes of material nature.
That's Krishna's arrangement.
Yeah.
That wouldn't be what they were thinking of, because if someone's a saint, they're totally surrendered to Radha Krishna, Chaitanya, and so they have no desire separate from what pleases Krishna.
So they have any kind of karma or attachment, or is this said that they have kind of some bhakti needing in remaining bhakti they need to complete in another life and kind of a story?
No, if they're a saint.
Is this possible?
They're a saint. If they're a pure devotee, there's no karma involved. Your karma is completely burned up. If you take initiation, your past karma is karma, but it's like a fan that's unplugged. The blades are going around. What's the name for karma? It's from the past, but it's
Prabda.
Prabda. You're not making new karma. I couldn't hear what you said. I'm sorry, because you were too close to me. So, so if you're, let's say you were supposed to have your throat cut or your head cut off, and this is your past karma, you know, that's still coming towards you, you cut your finger, so it's reduced. But if someone's a pure devotee, they don't take birth because they're forced to and they have desires. It's all based on Krishna's plan. So they're Krishna. It's not, they didn't finish their bhakti, so, and they were attached to women, so they come back as a woman devotee. No, if someone's a pure devotee, they're simply coming back to please Krishna. But in our soul, in our original person, we do have a nature and a type of service that's unique to us. So when they have a relationship with Krishna and friendship or parental or conjugal or servant, and so that will come forward, and you know, but it doesn't affect your material being or your material birth. You never, sometimes we say if you become pure, you never take birth again, but you never have to take birth again. But to serve Krishna, like Jai and Vijay, you can take birth. They were given 3 births as demons,
Or
but,
7.
and they chose the 3, but then they took a 4th and came back as Jagai and Madai. So to serve Krishna, devotees will do anything, and they never have to take birth.
Is that, well, I was in New York in 70s. Yeah,
What?
yeah. Yes, she understood.
Yeah, please go on.
No problem. One time we were in New York in 76. It was summertime. It was the appearance of Sanatan Goswami. And perhaps it was disappearance.
It was his
Anyhow,
disappearance.
was his disappearance. I'm sorry.
And
And
so
but Prabhupada said, oh, today is the appearance day of Sanatan Goswami. And I was finding Prabhupada.
Jagadish.
So Jagadish, Prabhupada said, Prabhupada is
his
his disappearance. Prabhupada said, appearance, disappearance is the same, because whatever they appear, they go on, continue serving the Lord.
He said, you
And so it
disappear in
doesn't-
one place,
Yeah.
you appear in another. Those were the words.
And Bhaktivinoda Thakur and so many of the great realized souls, they said, let me take birth in the house of a devotee, even if it's an insect, because they'll be able to hear, be able to take prasad and hear Harikatha. The gender is nothing, you know, doesn't matter. Actually, our sampradaya, many times it was in the hands of women, so-called women, because they say so-called because as souls, one life we could be male, next life female. In the spiritual world, yeah, there's called what is called Sthai Bhava. Sthai Bhava is the permanent relishment of particular ras with Krishna, and so we know that the highest devotees of the Lord are female. And, two conceptions were taken from the Nimbarka Nambaditya line, and one was that the absolute single-pointed worship of Radharani, and also the worship as the gopis did. So those are kind of those 2 principles. And so we you know, but that is very different. That people say, oh, devotees do that. Arjuna was a fighter, he's killing people. But it's different. We do the eating, matings, taking shelter, you know, defending. We do that, the animals do that, but devotees are dependent on the Lord. They don't worry about those things. And then,
So, Prabhuji, kindly clarify the body of saintly person, be it female or male, there isn't any basis, right? The decision is by Lord.
Yes, yes, absolutely. And then so, and their bodies are being, beside Sanatan Goswami, when I don't know if you know you probably know the pastime where he goes through the Jarikanda forest and drink some water, and then he gets as a result some boils in his body, and so he wants to. I know he wants to. He goes to Jagannathpuri with the idea was to purify himself. He probably commits suicide. Anyhow, make a story short, Lord Chaitanya says, "No, your body is mine. How can you do that to somebody's property? You know, damage his property or taking it. It's no longer your property, your body." And so, and then among some of the many things he said is that your body is totally spiritualized. It's like the spiritual master. They look to us like, oh, they get sick. No, that's just lila. And in order to turn our hearts towards, we want to serve them. We want to take care of them. If a child doesn't cry, the mother is busy doing other things and like that. As soon as the child cries, the mother will drop anything and take care of that child. And so yeah, it's very, very different. The bodies are. That's always said in the Gurvastakam in the mornings. It's Shashad Hari. Shashad means equal, like same as the Lord, as Hari. Shashad Hari Tenasana. And at the same time, he's the most intimate servant. So it's like something that a regular mind cannot understand. That's what I was saying. And we have to practice this. We have to do bhajan. What is called bhajan is that all the practices that our spiritual master has given us, which are the same in Purnaprajna, what Prabhupada gave us, should be the same as the next. It will be the same as the next, and no changes whatsoever. That way we can understand, get finer understanding, more subtle understanding of this message. But yeah, the gender of the pure devotee is not because of some past karma.
But I was just thinking,
many
she
times
was
it's like-
wondering if maybe I didn't answer correctly, because you were not just talking about pure devotees. Let's say a person is not a pure devotee, but they have to take at least one more birth to finish up because they're not ready they're not pure. Then it could be affected by what they're thinking of at the time of death. But
it's definitely affected.
yeah, so you could, if you're thinking of, just like Maharaj Bharata, he was thinking about the deer. So he took birth as a deer. So that's also in play. And
Was up to the level of bhav, which is very, very high. Once we started to feel those emotions, the favorable emotions towards the Lord, that's like just more. When that bhav concentrates, it becomes prem, and that's permanent. That's like really. But it says Prabhupada is placing a purpose that he had attained bhav,
Maharaj
that he keeps in attachment. He didn't trust that entity the Lord will take care of him. Yeah, sometimes when it's placed, we're thinking, we should do this, poor things and that. But maybe when we try to act, we cause some problem. In his case, he had to take birth again as an animal. But it's all lila though.
And then
it's just to show us something.
Right. And then in his next verse says, if you don't finish, Prabhupada said in your next, better than a bank account. And if you do 1% devotional service, next life is 2%. And then sometimes things like Lokanath, he was Narottam Das Thakur was his disciple, and they were chanting on the bank of the Jamuna, and someone from the village came and asked for water, and Lokanath was in deep meditation, and he ignored him because he was doing his service. And he came to his disciple Narottam Das, and Narottam Das stopped his chanting and gave him water. And so then Lokanath became very upset and said that you weren't, Krishna would give him water. You weren't really doing your meditation, your bhajan. So you have to leave. But it was actually also Leela because he left and he and Shamananda and Srinivas, they became the three preachers, the first book distributors in history. The writings of the Goswamis and took them out of Vrindavan. So it was actually Leela. There's no like rule book and everything follows the same.
There is, but it's beyond our what some people say pay credit or something. Like Brigu is one of the most intelligent beings apart from Brahma in this universe, and he can do calculations to how that karma will all the possibilities of that living entity, the soul, what path will follow. He's already done charts. We call it Brigu leaves. If you find the authentic ones, you can even find your trajectory. They'll find you and they'll find what's next in store for you and like that. But that's how it's very complex. We say karma. Oh, you do this.
Did Gaura leave and go
Like
to
that. We're putting people to sleep. For us, it's afternoon. I don't know what time it's in Pakistan now. Oh, it's early or morning or.
It's 10:45 p.m.
Oh, okay. Well, good night, bro. Sorry.
We should let you go to sleep so we can.
Thank you. You're in Hawaiian time. And Pakistan, you're just starting your day, right?
Haribol,
Prabhu.
I had a question to go to Prabhu.
Oh, okay.
There was a song. Sorry, I don't mean to keep you up.
I took enough spirulina and chlorella, then I'm wired anyway, so go ahead.
Okay, all right. There was a song, I don't know if it was played at the beginning of this session or that you went over the lyrics to the song. I think it was in the last session.
Okay, Vidyara Vilase. Vidyara Vilase by Bhaktivinoda Thakur, where he's basically admitting, well, not that he's admitting, he's speaking Vaishnav humility, but you wanted to know what song that was?
Yeah, so what is it called again?
Yeah, let me just look it up here for you. It's Vidyara Vilase. It's in the original songbook.
Vidyara Vilase?
Yeah, Vidyara Vilase. And in that song, which I'll just bring up on the screen right now for everyone, since we're all night owls, at least here on the East Coast.
Isn't it Ekadashi? Well,
here it is. Here it is. Here it is. Here it is. No, it's Ekadashi was yesterday for us. Bhaktivinoda Thakur from Sharanagati. Vidyara Vilase Katayinu Kala Paramasahaseyami. Or what's the other melody? Anyway, it doesn't matter. But the translation is great. I thought this was really appropriate for what we're reading in order to smash atheistic science. With great enthusiasm, I spent my time in the pleasures of mundane learning, and I never worshipped your lotus feet, O Lord. Now you are my only shelter. 2. Reading on and on, my hopes grew and grew, for I considered the acquisition of material knowledge to be life's true goal. How fruitless those hopes turned out to be, for all my knowledge proved feeble. Now I know that all such erudition is actually pure ignorance. All the so-called knowledge of this world is born of the flickering potency of your illusory energy, Maya. It is an impediment to the execution of devotional service to you. Indulgence in mundane knowledge verily makes an ass of the eternal soul by encouraging his infatuation with this temporary world. And then Bhaktivinoda very humbly says, here is one person who has been turned into such an ass, who for so long has carried on his back the useless burden of material existence. Now in my old age, for want of the power to enjoy, I find that nothing at all pleases me. 5. Life has now become agony, for my so-called erudite knowledge has proven itself to be worthless ignorance. Material knowledge has now become a pointed shaft and has pierced my heart with the intolerable burning pain of ignorance. O Lord, there is no treasure worth seeking in this world other than your lotus feet. Bhaktivinoda abandons all his mundane knowledge and makes your lotus feet the sum and substance of his life. So I've rarely heard that chanted by anybody, but I remember as a young brahmachari when I read this, I thought, wow, Bhaktivinoda Thakur is really attacking all the academic institutions and all the, you know, PhD. Prabhupada said plow department because often people are proud of their PhD, but Prabhupada said PhD stands for plow department because he said at least if they were out in the fields producing some food, they would be contributing something to society. And also sometimes we say PhD means piled higher and deeper in ignorance. But you know, not to put that down. If someone has no offense to you, Nichilila, you must have a PhD if you're a full-blown MD doctor. I mean, you're our secret weapon because you're Krishna's devotee, and yet you've acquired this PhD, and but you're not puffed up. At least I haven't experienced that. So you're very effective for preaching Krishna consciousness to the academic community because you have those accolades, but yet they haven't gone to your head. You're still Krishna's humble devotee. Was that helpful, Ananda Dave Prabhu?
Yeah, I appreciate it. I just wanted to know what the song was so that I can review it because I've been reviewing some bhajans lately, like Kave Have.
Say Dinamar.
Yeah, Kave Have. What I seen. What's it called?
Favorite John Swami.
Yeah, I was listening. I've been listening to that for several days in a row because I just for some reason I resonate a lot with Vishnu John. He was like a very prolific kirtaniya and did like a lot of traveling and did a lot of uh preaching to like many different. He was instructed to go many different places, but so. Also, I wanted to say that in regards to like how like the atheistic scientists, they don't have much they're not very a lot of them are not really they're not very you can't really convince them very well to give up their ignorance. So there's a passage in the Padma Purana that says those who have performed millions of austerities and millions of great fire sacrifices for thousands of previous births and have thus burnt all their sins, they are the only ones who develop serious devotion to Lord Sri Krishna and accept him to be the supreme God. So it's really a lot of because we're convinced it's because our fortune, our previous karma, we know we are very take very quickly up to the process of bhakti, whereas other the atheistic scientists they don't have all of that accumulated yogya like that. So that it's if we can convince them, then it's a really like even just one scientist, it's a big win.
Yeah, I think, I don't know, maybe Nurhari and Bavatrini can correct me, but I remember hearing something or reading a letter where Prabhupada was saying one university student is equivalent to like 10, regular folks because university students, they have some intellect. And I think Prabhupada once said also that students are our best customers as well.
And many of us were students or just coming out of college or interrupting our college to become part of this movement.
But yeah, that's true. But the statement about how they had to have done austerities, et cetera, Lord Chaitanya just wiped out all those so-called prerequisites, and that everyone can be
Swept up by his mercy.
yeah, swept up. That's the best way to say it. Swept up by his mercy. But college students, that Rupanuga was at a college where
He was teaching.
yeah, he was and
He told the story to us. Sorry for interrupting, Bob. I'll let you continue in a second. He was in New York, and there was a request from some people at the University of Buffalo, and he was a married man, and he had a son, at least one son, as far as I know, to support. But there was a request for someone to come to the University of Buffalo and teach Bhagavad Gita, and allegedly there was no one else to do it. So he went, and of course he's best to tell the whole story. But but eventually that course got accepted as a credited course, and from that course, the first devotee he made was Burijan, who established the Vaishnav Institute of Higher Education, and Lakshmani and Jagadish and Trivikram Swami came, Gunagrahi Maharaj came,
Narottamananda.
Narottamananda, Krishna Bhavani, Lokavarna.
Narottam wasn't the only one. His best friend from childhood, they joined together. His name was Deva Prasta, and he was the Pujari on the first Rath Yatra cart.
They're together with him. They were good friends.
Yeah, yeah, and there were several groups. So I didn't know the story, but so yeah.
We know the ones who were there.
But I'm glad to hear the story.
And so college preaching is something that Prabhupada really appreciated a lot. And it's really exciting and it's fun and it keeps you really sharp because these students, they hit you with all kinds of questions and it makes you reflect that, wow, I don't really know our philosophy that well, or I could have answered that better if I only would have remembered, this point of Prabhupada. Or you go and you start reading more, you start researching more, so you're ready for them next time.
I had one of their classes described. So they're teaching Bhagavad Gita. Krishna Bhamani signed up for the class with her boyfriend or husband, Bhagawan. I forget their names. Her name is Inez. But anyway, so at the class, the Bhagavad Gita class, probably at the end, they told all the students, they're all sitting cross-legged, because it's being presented as bhakti yoga. And they said, close your eyes and put your right hand out. And then they a galubjaman and everyone's hand and said, put this in your mouth.
So the course ended with Prabhupada teaching the
Oh yeah, Prabhupada came and gave the class.
The final class was given by Imagine that.
Wow.
It's a dream. Well, I was just thinking that, we might have a hard time with the professors because from Purnaprajna Prabhu, we see how they're so dogmatic, so entrenched in this thought of atheistic thought. But students are still, they're fertile, they're open. At least that's what a student was. Where you go to exercise your brain, your big muscle. It's the exposure to ideas and the debates and like that. So yeah, we need to. I don't know if by law or just bring it to if we had lots of money, bring it to the higher court to give us equal rights in colleges to teach this. Nobody's teaching Vedic science. They either go to a sentimental understanding of spirituality, or they go against it. They're two sides of the same coin.
We used to have a book called The Scientific Basis of Krishna Consciousness that was written by Bhakti Swarup Damodar Maharaj, which Srila Prabhupada really liked, but I have not seen that book in print in decades. I don't know if maybe they're printing it in Mumbai or what the deal is, but I haven't seen it in ages.
What is the title of the book?
the scientific basis of Krishna consciousness. It was just like perfection of yoga, beyond birth and death. It was included in that whole series, right, Bavatrini or Hari?
Yeah, I can't remember who was BBT that came out.
Yeah.
I've seen it recently.
Oh, you have?
Yeah, it's printed in India, so Indian BBT still prints it, and I think you can get it. Sometimes our temple gets it.
First year I was
Where,
at the
where are you,
temple.
Prabhu? In Vrindavan, or you would say your temple?
Well, I'm in Melbourne, Australia, so.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's
I didn't. Sorry, Bavatrini.
No, I'm just saying your background is.
No, not because of that.
I did an entire interview with Avadut Maharaj, who is formerly known as Upananda Prabhu, who met the devotees in 1969 in Berkeley, and then he went to Sydney as a hippie.
We watched your interview. Yeah.
Yeah.
We watched interviews. Yeah.
He met the devotees there in Sydney in like 69, 70, and then he went on to develop. I don't know exactly in what order it goes, Brisbane, Melbourne, or Melbourne. I think Melbourne first and then Brisbane. And he was like a founder of those temples. I mean, amongst the other devotees. And then he went on to New Zealand for a brief time, and then helped to establish Fiji Yatra, and then went to Ghana and Lagos, and yeah, and
made that his hometown. He said.
Huh?
He said he made it like kind of his hometown. The people ask him, "Where are you from?" He said, "Lagos."
Okay. Yeah, he's amazing, God brother, and he's still continuing to travel and preach.
Very humble and amazing.
He was
person.
speaking on the program. It was last night for us. When did you hear about the 9 islands? Was that the nine daughters of Sachi are the 9 islands of Navadvip?
I heard Tridandi Swami's talking about it when I listened to part 1 of the Navadvip Parikram today.
Oh, okay. We didn't listen to the beginning of the part 1, but because we
Prairie is saying good night to everyone. Thank you so much for coming, Prairie. You're our future hope. You're the next generation of devotees, and you're in for the long haul. So it's important that you take good care of yourself. And thank you very much for availing yourself to the association of my senior God brothers and God sisters here.
Thank you, Gauradas. Please accept my humble obeisances. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
See you Wednesday, I hope. Thank you.
Yes. Good night. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. And I think I should say good night too. It's 11 p.m. here. My head feels like it's exploding.
Good night. Good night. Sweet
Check
dreams.
out Brad Ravi's Vaishnavibhyo Namo Namaha. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Nitya Gaura Premanandi Hari Hari. Oh, you got the book there. Okay.
This is the book, right?
Yeah. It's got a new cover. The new cover.
Okay.
That's the same book.
Yeah, Bhakti Swarup Damodar Maharaj. Yeah.
Yeah, we need to get that. Okay, let's try to come back still, Krishna Prabhu, Wednesday if you can. Spread the word. Hare Krishna. Good night, Via. Hare Krishna.
Good night. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.